He also said, don't be first, don't be last, get yourself in the middle. Or what was the other one? Something about if the enemy's in range, so are you. He was a cook. I don't know that he hurt anyone while serving, except from the inside, maybe. You know, I often think of the lessons he taught me as a veteran, and hopefully the respect that many of us carry forward as those who have served and those who have been related to and those who have been protected by a tremendous segment of our population. So again, my name is David Lipsetz. I'm the Housing Assistance Council's Executive Director, newly minted. Thanks for the job, Marvin. And we have been developing of late a tremendous set of resources on veterans housing issues. Housing Assistance Council, as I hope you know or may know, we're a national intermediary that focuses on poor and rural geography in a way that few, if any, others across the country do. And we think it's a tremendous honor to serve that population, a challenge too big for any one group. So thank you for being here to help on that focus. And there are a couple of other kind of logistics and welcoming remarks, but I would like to steal a moment if we can quickly run around the table so that folks introduce themselves. I see a number of friendly and regular faces, but would love an opportunity for each of you to hear who's here so you get a chance to meet and network as the event goes forward. Mr. Ginn.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Marvin Ginn. I'm from Oklahoma. I'm a Choctaw Indian out of New Mexico. And I'm a HAC board member also, and I run a native CDFI in New Mexico called Native Community Finance.
Hi, I'm Bill Randall. I'm from Western Maine Community Action in the western part of Maine. Been at Community Action about 8 years, and so I'm enjoying this trip down here to DC and right in the middle of all the craziness that the DC folks have to deal with. So.
I'm Retha Patton from Eastern Tennessee in the Appalachian Mountains. I represent a affordable housing CDC that serves a rural area up in the Appalachian Mountains.
I'm Christopher Tomey. I'm with Habitat for Humanity International. I lead our U.S. Government Relations and Advocacy team, so I work with both our federal lobbyists as well as our state local team, which focuses on our local affiliate capacity building, advocacy capacity building.
All right, thanks for the invitation. My name is Curtis Suttle Sr. I'm a board chairperson for the White Mountain Apache Housing Authority. I'm a member of the White Mountain Apache tribe located in White River, Arizona, which is a rural area east of Phoenix. Glad to be here.
Good afternoon. My name is Dorothy Parker. I'm Deputy Director of White Mountain Apache Housing Authority. And I came with Mr. Suttle here from White River, Arizona, and it's northeastern of Phoenix. It's about a 4-hour drive from Phoenix, but it's we are in a rural area.
I'm Debbie Kaufman. I'm with Purple Heart Homes. We are a company that's going to be 10 years old next year that was started by 2 combat wounded veterans, and they created a mission to provide housing and rehab housing to make it accessible for service-connected wounded veterans, disabled veterans. And I'm from Washington, D.C.
Mike Elder is also with Purple Heart Homes from our corporate office in Statesville, North Carolina. Very happy to be here. Not happy with the traffic, though.
When I go to North Carolina, they say, you know, give yourself 15 extra minutes. There's traffic. I'm like, 15 extra minutes?
Like, about 2.5 extra hours.
I'm with Changing Homelessness. We're a nonprofit. We're based out of Jacksonville, Florida. The reason I'm here is in the last SSBF cycle, the VA asked us what we thought of about 14 other very rural counties in Northeast Florida and Southeast Georgia. So we are exploring what should we do, what can we do as far as expanding the affordable housing base in those counties that need it most.
Hi, thank you for the invitation. My name is Dave. I represent Atlas Research. Atlas Research is a service disabled veteran-owned business. It used to be a small business, but we're gradually going into the medium-sized space. Right now, our office is down the road, 2 blocks away. It's been nice being here. Thank you for the food.
I'm Mark Walker. I'm with the American Legion. Our headquarters office is here on 16K. We're a veteran service organization. We've been around for almost 100 years, and just glad to be here. Looking forward to being informed about what's going on in the world.
Thank you for the invitation. My name is Charles Hill. I'm with the Veterans Bill Department at Habitat for Humanity International.
Thank you very much. I'm Corey Aber from Freddie Mac Multifamily. I lead our community mission and impact finance team, and a big part of that is a focus in serving rural markets and high needs rural areas and populations.
I'm David Gilson. I'm the Director of Veterans Build for Habitat for Humanity International, based out of Atlanta. One thing Christopher didn't say was that he got this program started, serving veterans through Habitat.
Yes, that's relevant.
Hi, I'm Son Walker with Habitat for Humanity International, Associate Director of the Veterans Build Program, and I'm also out of Atlanta, and looking forward to hearing some engaging conversations about veterans in the rural community.
I am Karen Boyce. I'm the Administrative Manager of a grant per diem program, which is a transitional housing, a 26-bed home in Northfield, Vermont.
I'm Rebecca King. I'm Acting Director of Policy with the National Housing Conference, and we've been engaged in the veterans housing space for a number of years, so I'm glad to be here.
I'm Michael De La Rosa. I'm also with Habitat International. I'm part of the Veterans Build program, and I'm actually coordinating with the Great Lakes region for World.
My name is Corey Katrina, and I'm with the White Mountain Apache Housing Authority. I'm Nicole Quintero. I'm with the White Mountain Apache Housing Authority at Cape Curtis in North Bay. I work with the veterans. I'm the veteran coordinator. We help to renovate veterans' homes.
Hi, I'm Mary Gable with the National Alliance to End Homelessness. And two of my big issues are rural and veteran homelessness. So this is a two-fer for me. And I grew up in rural Northwest Illinois, and I'm happy to work on this issue.
Hey, Lance.
I'm Lance Stewart with the Housing Assistance Council.
Good afternoon, Jeff Mosley, Housing Assistance Council. Keith Wiley, Housing Assistance.
Christina Davila, Housing Assistance Council.
Hi, I'm Joe Belden, also with HAG.
Good afternoon, Shantaria Charleston with the Housing Assistance Council. I'm the Program and Training Manager, and I oversee HEC's veteran initiatives.
Leslie Strauss with the Housing Assistance Council, not really attending the meeting.
So we have a huge thank you, of course, to make to the Home Depot Foundation. These folks have been doing great work for a long time, and I think it was around 2011 that they really put a strong focus on veterans work through their foundation. Since then, they've put more than $200 million toward this cause, helped build 34,000 plus houses and 35,000 employees who are veterans working at Home Depot. Their commitment to this cause has been phenomenal, and their help with us here as a group and to the Housing Assistance Council is very much appreciated, as is JP Morgan Chase, who also has a commitment that started around the same time of really focusing in through their foundation on these issues. They have gathered 200 plus businesses together to focus on veterans hiring, which they've done, I think, 30,000, or no, this one's 400,000 jobs amongst those 200 plus businesses, built about 1,000 homes themselves, and have several thousand employees. So those kinds of organizations have been tremendously supportive of the cause, give us an opportunity to gather here, and paid for the cookies, which I've had mine. But if you want yours, you better hurry out and grab it. Don't mind getting up and moving around during this. We'll be here till about 5 o'clock today. You can come and go as you please on the elevators. We've got those turned on for you. And we have some couches in a little glass room off the side if you need to sneak out and make a phone call. We have bathrooms right around the corner here. I also wanted to know, just on the logistics side of things, that when you signed up for this, we've also enrolled everyone here in the Hack News, which is a set of publications, but also an email distribution where you can get regular news on these topics and more. Please look for those in your email box, which I'm sure is empty and just waiting one more set of emails. And for those of you who have benefited from this in the past, and those of you who are interested in it as we move forward, we're coming up on another round of grants in this area. As you may know, the Housing Assistance Council re-grants much of what we get from Home Depot and others to local organizations who are really working on bricks and mortar projects to help serve our rural veteran population. And so please look to us again, because our goal in many ways, tremendous luxury, I think, is that we're a partner here for you. We do some of the research and information gathering of this sort. We also do technical assistance and training for your specific organization, feet on the ground in your locality. We can help train you in your pursuit of affordable housing, not just for veterans, but in needy rural areas. And we also have a loan fund. So if you're looking for the nicest servicer you have ever met at some of the lowest rates around, come by, do business with us. We're happy to help get your organizations moving in that way as well. We're going to build awareness on veterans issues today. It's a key takeaway. We also want to take some time with a couple of our guests here to highlight actual examples from local places so that you can see how those work if you're a policy person, so you can adjust your views at a policy level if you're a local provider, so that you can see the way these things can happen. And we're also going to have a couple of folks here today who are going to highlight specific resources that you can take home with you to your organizations or to your member organizations on ways to use federal funds and other funds to get this work done. This work will never be done. We will be at this task for the rest of our careers. It's the right place to be. It feels great, and we're getting a lot of good work done. I am thrilled to turn it over to our staff to talk about some of the specific ways in which HAC is contributing to that mission and helping this community with a research element. Dr. Keith Wiley and Kristen Davila and present the work that we're doing to you here. They're also open from this point forward. Questions that you have, you can reach out to us. We're happy to help you and your organizations. They'll be followed by a panel on how to provide single-family housing for folks, a multi-family housing panel, and then we'll have words from many of the folks you heard around the table who are here. So without further ado, let's run through some of what HAC can provide on research in this area, and I will get out of your way. So thank you again for being here. I really appreciate it.
So Keith will go first.
Okay. Might already be done. Okay, thanks everybody for coming. I'll just stand up because sometimes I talk too loud, too low, and people can't hear me. And my wife complains all the time. I think maybe it's because she gets mad about the heat in the room. And I always want to hold her, and she wants to hotter. So she says I'm mumbling about it. We're just going to talk here a little bit. I'm a research associate with the Housing Assistance Council, and Christina Davila and me, we were at the research in the information division, and we do a lot of research and data. And one of the areas is on rural veterans, and we have a lot of resources we think are very useful that you can actually access. It can help you with finding information out about veterans, and this is kind of information we think can be useful, for like say a small group who's trying to apply apply for a grant, or an individual who's trying to make a case, maybe even everything from an opinion letter to maybe their congressperson who want to show them information about the veteran community and what they're trying to do, or even plan them with their efforts. And so I'm just going to highlight a few, and then Christina's going to show some examples of actually accessing our web portal where we have veterans data, which I think is very useful. So we're just going to talk here about a few publications. And there's three of them I'm going to highlight. One of them is on the aging veteran population. The second one is on veteran mortgage lending, specifically the VA loan guarantee program. And the third is on veteran homelessness and housing in general and some of the assistance programs. And then we're going to talk a little bit about our Data Central, which is our website. And Christina is going to run through a few examples of like how you can access the data. And down below with the arrows, which I think is really nice, is our website, www.ruralhome.org. And you can click on that. And you can go to the Initiatives tab and the Affordable Housing for Rural Veterans tab, and you can access these reports. And I do want to thank like the Home Depot Foundation and all the groups who's helped us with the report. I really like to do the research. I think these reports and data are really powerful information, and I think it's a good resource. And through their support, we're able to do this. And so, when I go home at night, sometimes I'm really, I can really be happy about my job. My wife doesn't hear about it, but I'm really happy to talk about the data. And I think we make a big impact. And I think these are good products. Now, the first paper report I want to talk about is Aging Veterans in the United States. And it's exactly what the title said. It's a snapshot of older veterans and social, economic, and housing characteristics. And the reason why we highlighted them is I think a lot of people, maybe me including, oftentimes think of veterans. They think of returning from war veterans, like the most recent wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, which are still ongoing. But actually, the majority of veterans or baby boom generation in the Vietnam War era. And that's really important. I think it's over 60%. And that's going to really shape the services that are provided to them, the services that are going to be provided for the next couple of decades. And as noted here, particularly regarding like housing, like transitioning to retirement and the needs. So it's going to drive services. So in this report, we note the population, we note the characteristics of the population. And I think it's important to know that if you're going to plan services for them. And particularly in rural areas, the veteran population tends to be even older. And so this, I think, is a good resource. It kind of frames it and it kind of talks about the central group of veterans who will be probably very important over the next couple of decades as far as service provision. The next one is Soldiers Home. It's a closer look at the Department of Veteran Affairs Home Loan Program, or the VA Loan Guarantee Program, and we looked at home mortgage disclosure data from 2005 to 2014. And when I think of the VA loan program, I think of the GI Bill, and I think of you can't overstate the importance that law had to expanding home ownership for Americans. So we wanted to go back in and look at the program today because I think sometimes it doesn't get its due, the VA loan program. And we looked at the role that it had played. And it plays a huge role, actually, particularly during the economic downturn. Programs like the VA loan program have stepped in and picked up a lot of the lending activity. And I think last year, it was over the last HMDA data, it was over 700,000 VA loan guarantees were made. And this is a particularly important product, particularly for certain groups like rural veterans in rural areas or minority veterans. I think 15% of the mortgage loans in HMDA for the 2014 year to Native Americans were VA loans, and almost 20% to African Americans were VA loans. It's a very important loan product. I just don't think people oftentimes, they kind of still think about the GI Bill. And also, if you look at certain counties, like a lot of where military bases are, you'll see that 30–40% of the lending activity are VA loans. So again, and I think we like to highlight this and talk about all the communities that it reaches, and it's been increasing for the last 4 or 5 years. And the last paper I want to note is from Shelter to Service. But basically what we did was we provided a description of the veteran population. This was our initial paper. And what we did was, I think this paper does a good job of defining, like it looks at the veteran population as the larger cohort, the aging veteran population, and then the younger returning cohort. It talks about like their different needs and some of the different challenges, like you've got the older veterans, and they may be more like transitioning housing as they age and retire, but you have the younger veterans, and they have other issues like higher unemployment and issues like that. And the overarching focus of this paper was on homelessness. And it's been a few years now, and there's been a lot of great work done. One, when we looked at the population, we focused on that. There's been a lot of great work done on the homeless part of the population. There's been decreases in veteran homelessness for like 3 or 4 last counts, I think. So there's been a lot of good work done by people in this room. But in this paper, we pull them out and we highlight them, particularly in rural areas, because it's very difficult with homelessness in rural areas in general. It's hard to count the population. It's hard to get them services. It's hard to get them to services. So we try to highlight that and talk about some of the programs like the VAST program and how that might be used to expand and help with veteran homelessness. So I think it's a really good paper, and that's an issue I think sometimes you don't hear a lot about when you get down to it is rural veterans and homelessness. And I think it does a good job of laying that out, laying the issue out. And the last thing, and I'm going to turn this over to Christina, is this is a thing that I really like. I'm a boring data guy by heart, so I'll spend time in my basement, thank you, working on my data. And it's not just because that's where it's cool. My wife wins this argument over the heat, so I got to get down there to get where it's cool. But we have this data portal. I think it's a really good tool. It has demographic, economic, and housing data. It has like VA loan data. It has homeless count data. And what you can do is you can actually go there and access it for multiple different geographies. So I think this is really a powerful tool. Again, like say you're planning on serving disabled veteran populations in a small county in say Tucker County, West Virginia, where my mom's from. You could go here and get that kind of information and kind of make your plans on who you're going to serve, or poverty, veteran poverty in a certain area. Or you could go there and get a state data sheet if you wanted to, you were going to a state housing conference and you wanted to tell, I work in Tennessee and here's the veteran population, you can access a sheet that tells you the nice information on your area there. And I think it's really powerful because it's in one graphic portrayal, you can kind of get a quick snapshot of the population. And you could even it just helps you make your argument. I think it's a really powerful tool. It gives you that kind of, and it's veteran specific. And so that's pretty rare, actually, to get one website where you can get that. And the website is www.veteransdata.info. And I'm going to turn it over to Christina because she'll show you how to actually use and access it. Because if I did it, it would just crash. It would be bad.
Okay, so this is our Veterans Data Portal. This is the website. Hopefully it'll...
You can also make that through hack to website. Yeah.
Right, yes, there's a link on our website also. Let me just move this over. I'm going to zoom in a bit. Okay. So this is the homepage that you see. We wanted to share this resource with you because it's a one-of-a-kind database that is veteran-specific. And it has data from the census, from HMDA, PUMS, point in time, for example. And it's compiled all in one place here for you. So if you look at the homepage here, these are the options you have. Demographics, and that goes up to the county level. The same thing for VA lending. And then economic and housing, you can go to the state level and then do metro or non-metro areas. And then homelessness goes to the continuum of care. And then the VA medical centers, you can see a list of them for the state. So we're going to run through an example. So say that I'm in Allegheny County, Maryland, which is a very rural place, if you're familiar. It's suffered from a lot of population and economic decline in the past few decades. And so the population tends to be older. So the nonprofit I work for is helping veterans with disabilities. And we want to know how many of the veterans do have disabilities. Because we were filling out a grant application, we need to support our narrative. But we want the specific number, so then you can come in our data portal. And I'll just leave you here. So go to demographics, county. You can pick the state. Said Maryland, and then the county was Allegheny. And then these are all the indicators you can choose from. There's veteran population, period of service, poverty, education. We're going to pick disability because that's what we're interested in. But you can also pick all of them and get the report of all of those indicators at once.
So we're gonna hit get report. And then hopefully you all can see this. You can see that there's about 6,000 veterans in this county, and about 2,000 of which have a disability, and that's largely because the population is an older population. And if you look at the percentages here, it's about 32%. We're kind of zoomed in, so we cut off a little bit of it. Okay, so anyways, there's 32% of the county that has a disability, and if you can see right here, the national average is 27%, so it is a higher percentage. And also to the left here, you can see that you can get all the reports. You can get a PDF version, an Excel version, or you can print it out. So we'll do another example. We can run a new report. This time we'll be in Duval County, Florida, which maybe you know, they have lots of military bases there, and therefore a younger veteran population, and they are more likely to be buying houses at that age. So we wanted to see how many VA originations are being done in that county. So we would go to VA Lending, County, Florida, and then Duval. And then these are all the indicators related to VA lending. We are going to do VA originations, and then you get report. And here you can see the percentage is 18.3%. The national average is about 8%. So in this county, a lot of the originations are coming from the VA. Okay, so now we're going to look at some more regional information. So we have a map tab up here. Yes.
Is that a yearly today? What is that?
It says the source up here. So that says 24.
Yeah, it's 1 year. That's the annual. That's the total for the year. Yeah, that's actually really high. It is about 8. It's like twice the average you would see for most of the time.
Yeah. Okay, so we can go to our map tab up here. We have about 5 or 6 maps. So this first one is the veteran population map. Oh, I have to zoom. Okay, so you can see the legend here. Ranges from about 6% of the state is a veteran to almost 14% here. And if you hover over, you can see the number of veterans and the percent. And then if you click on a specific state, so we have Virginia is about 11.6%, but you can see the diversity across the state with the counties here. So as you can see, the darker red indicates more veterans, and that makes sense because these are where all the military bases are, as opposed to over here where it's only about 5%. Okay. So we have the veteran population. We have the same thing for Vietnam era veterans, or income, or housing problems, and so on. So that's just a quick snapshot geographically. And then the last tab is the resources tab up here. And to the right here, I'm going to show you our state profile sheets, which gives you a PDF overview of the states with important indicators and infographics. So this one is South Dakota, but you can pick any state that you like. And it gives you, maybe it's coming. Okay. So it gives you the number of veterans, and then over here is when they served, the county that they served in. Then it gives you economic indicators like the rate of poverty or what their median income level is. And then also housing information, so how many of them own a home or how much their home is worth. And so the beauty of this is that you can have a 2-page document that summarizes the whole state's indicators, stats, and figures that you can just hand to someone. So that's why it's so handy. And then the last thing is just to go back to the resources page. We've created a comprehensive list of resources for the veteran population related to the housing resources. We also have healthcare resources, community resources, and then general resources. A lot of these come from the VA. There's a variety of sources. And if you have a particular interest in this initiative, you just click the link, and then it shows you that information there. So that was an overview of the data portal. I think we have a few more minutes if you guys have any questions or comments.
How often do you update your data?
Well, we need to update it again. It's been about a year or so. We're working on it to update it. Yeah, I know, because that, that's one thing about these projects. When you start them, it's constantly churning out more and more data, and that really matters. Yeah, we're working on it, especially like with the loan data and stuff. Like the lending volume of VA lending has increased considerably, and that is.
And if I may just add on that point, Keith, if I'm not mistaken, the most recent data from the census, so we're beholden, a lot of these are populated by public resources, we just aggregate them for the end user.
Yeah.
So the most recent census data is coming out this week, next week?
2 weeks. Yeah, that's a big day for me.
Yeah.
It really
Yeah, it takes, Keith's really efficient, but it takes him about a month to get everything combined. But I just give you some time, and the home mortgage disclosure data has recently came out, so.
Yeah, no, and it is, like Glenn said, there's, at the end of the year, it's all pushed down, but like I like that, like when the mortgage, the HMDA data comes out, but it's been increasing a lot too. That's a very good point, because it's constantly changing, especially like with a lot of the homeless counts and stuff like that. That's constantly changing. There's been a lot of effort to lower the numbers and stuff.
And I have two quick questions. One, just to confirm, this is for all veterans, not targeting rural veterans, right? Yeah.
Yes, for all veterans.
And then I know we were zoomed in, but you can kind of see how a particular data point compares for the veterans to the national indicator.
I think the national average for all of them, we just too zoomed in.
Yeah, because when you zoom in, I think, because it always shows you the US numbers.
So that's just really, it's really helpful sometimes to show the disproportionate nature sometimes.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask on the housing aggregated data, are we going to move to where we can get county information? Because although it's great, you look at California and the housing situation in Lake County in Northern California is dramatically different from San Diego County. So the ability to take the housing data down to the county level would be valuable. And I love the resource as it is. That would just like move it to the, and since we're all in the housing space, it would be really.
Well, that would be, Lance can probably speak for this, but for me, that would be a dream of mine. Right now, it's not there, but we have to use the palms and do the ag, but I would really like to go there too. It would be but it's not available currently, but I wish we could.
Well, I would only add, Keith's more of an expert on this, on the kind of maturations, but getting just to that is quite a contortion or a lot of work by Keith and his team and Christina. It comes from a specific, they noted an IPUMS data set. And so we make those contortions just to get this data, and you cannot go down to lower geography at this point. It's my understanding through some form of legislation, I need to research this. I once knew that there's now going to be more mandated reporting of veterans in public data sets, but that's still coming to fruition. I think this would be an advocacy point for people to take to the U.S. Census Bureau and your elected representatives. But the way the data are currently structured, I don't think we can get it. That's as good as we've got.
I would like to reiterate what Lance is saying too. Like some of this is just recording the info. The census stuff and how that is very difficult because but like the HMDA data, just an improvement alone would be if they just noted whether the person was a veteran, and they don't, and stuff like that, subtle stuff that limits the ability to use the data that could make it more powerful. Like if it just stated whether the loan was, because we use VA loans, because that's the only way we can be certain that that's a veteran loan, but stuff like that would make it better if they did expand the reporting requirements that we could tell, but yeah, I think about this all the time. Yeah, no, I love data and I wish they do need to, I think, expand or make more available.
Just out of curiosity, I'm just wondering, talking about data, if there's anything out there that shows the rate of suicide when it comes to veterans enrolled in any kind of housing program, because just trying to see if there's a correlation between being enrolled in any kind of housing program and then the rate of suicide in that population. So I was just wondering.
Not that I would be aware of. I mean, the CDC has data, but that's pretty specific. That would almost be something that would probably be internal to the Department of Defense or Veteran Affairs, I would imagine, but publicly not. I don't think so I know there's, at least most of the information says there's an elevated rate of suicide, but I don't know that that's specific around any programs. No.
Right. The rate of suicide, I saw, I had an opportunity to see the data as far as veteran suicide is concerned, but I was just wondering if those who are enrolled for any kind of housing program, the rate of suicide in that population is a little bit reduced or, not as high as those who are not enrolled in any kind of housing. I was just thinking about
Yeah, no. In fact, that would be a good thing to look into. Yeah, I mean, that would be good information to include. Yes, thank you.
Okay, I ask you to thank these guys. They've done an immense amount of work. Marvin and I were out by the cookies.
Now there's no left, right?
Yeah. Just saying, I warned you earlier. I also would appreciate it if our staff has done an amazing amount of work to get to this point on this topic, bring it up, and we're at this point generally done with our presenting and turning it over to guests and area experts on this stuff. Shantaria Charleston and Joe Belden have led much of that work, as has our research and training and technical assistance division. So if you could indulge me, please, a hand for my staff here. Who've done an immense work. And all the reports that Keith referenced are on the table out here. Bill, did you have one of those sheets? Did I see that a second ago?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, these state sheets. Did you do the main one?
It was done for me.
Shocking how that happened. These are phenomenal tools. If you're going to talk to your elected representatives or others in your community who do this research and advocacy work, this 2-page tool I dropped off at your Senate members, but many elected to show really the compilation of the data we've described there. So I invite you to go on. It's a quick print, and you can use those materials in your advocacy. So we are we'll have the panel now on home ownership and home repair. We'll take a break and then we'll reconvene for the multifamily. Karen, I promise you the other panelists for multifamily will be here. Don't worry, you'll be on your own. Look, for this one, there are a rich set of solutions out there, but they need to be out there distributed more for the home ownership and home repair that serve rural veterans. Thankfully, we have someone here to guide us through this conversation, Marvin Ginn, who's not only a fantastic person who's on my board, so you can see some of that connection, but the service that he provided in the Air Force, his background as a member of the Choctaw tribe, and his service to organizations like ours and many others has shown a lot of people that he carries an expertise around how to do finance on native lands that very few have. When he incubated the Native Community Finance organization as a CDFI serving on tribal lands, he put himself into one of the most challenging housing markets we know, and has been able to succeed in addressing not only that broader case with financial literacy and lending out of his organization, but a focus on this issue, which I know is dear to him. I'll allow Marvin to introduce the panelists for home ownership and home repair.
Thanks, David. First of all, how many veterans do we have here? I want to thank everybody for their service. And I always start out with, hey, I'm 15-935-64. The younger guys probably don't know that, but that's actually my service number. And that's almost 50 years ago, and it's still stuck in my head. It's one of those things that we as veterans, and I'm sure Chairman knows and Joe knows, they drove that into our heads like you wouldn't believe it. And I know it's changed. It changed before I got out of the service, but in the old days, we had service numbers, not Social Security numbers.
Switched to SSANs in 1969. It was very confusing.
Yeah, it was. It was for all of us. But first, I want to thank my panelists here, and to start out with, we have Bill and I need my glasses. I'm old. But Bill Crandall is with Western Maine Community Action, and he's been the housing program manager since 2009. And I'm going to keep this short so that they can tell their story, because they can tell it a lot better than I can. Okay? Then we have Rena Patton, and she's about 25 years
Long time.
of community development experience, gaining broad knowledge through the experience in the construction program manager and grants program manager and administrator. You know, she just goes on and on and on. and I think Fahi is a big part of,
yes,
your deal, so that is really nice. Christopher, I don't even know how. Tommy. Forget the P, huh?
Yeah.
But anyway, he's with Habitat Humanity International, like he said, and, you know, tremendous of the housing board at White Mountain Apache. So we really have a diverse set of people here that can address many situations. Okay? After that, let's kind of get started here. And this one is kind of for the whole panel here. Can you talk a little bit about the mission, services, and scope of activities, your organization, and how your team goes about accomplishing its mission and service provisions? Who wants to go first?
I guess do you have a video?
Well, as they're working on the technical issues, I'll talk a little bit about Eastern Aid is a regional affordable housing community development organization. We do all types of housing, so we're not specifically geared at veterans, but we serve all areas of affordable housing. We serve in the Appalachian region, where we have some small urban areas as well as rural.
A new housing development in Carter County is getting national attention for its take on affordable housing.
Patriot Place, a new complex that offers many first-time homebuyers the chance to buy a home at the same cost as renting an apartment.
Micah Smith found out that of the 41 lots, half are designated specifically for veterans. She spoke to the only resident now living at Patriot Place.
Cream and sugar stuff? How many sugars?
Ronald Hayes almost gave up on his dream of buying his own home.
The interest rates and everything, and it discouraged me.
Hayes said he heard about an organization called Eastern Aid, a nonprofit that is trying to help veterans find affordable housing.
They suggested that I come out here, being I was a veteran, because they were developing this area here for veterans.
Hayes' neighborhood, Patriot Place, is an Eastern Aid subdivision that offers veterans and working class people a chance to buy their own home on non-traditional terms.
All the people at Eastern Aid, they were great. They worked with me, crunched the numbers and checked my finances and stuff like that.
Eastern Aid Executive Director Retha Patton says for the same price as renting an apartment, residents like Hayes can build their own home and can add a little bit of their own curb appeal.
Lots of funding makes it affordable.
Eastern Aid uses grants and state funds to subsidize the costs associated with the building process. For example, a plot of land that costs $35,000 here.
People can buy lots here for actually more like $20,000 or $25,000.
And now other organizations throughout the country are taking a look at Eastern Aid's blueprint, specifically their emphasis on veterans' homes.
I was being invited to Washington, D.C. to speak at Capitol Hill about rural housing for veterans, because that's a huge topic right now.
Patton says for many veterans and other first-time home buyers, owning a home seemed like a pipe dream.
They were able to go from really substandard conditions to this beautiful home, and to them it's their castle.
It's ideal. It's perfect. I find something every day uniquely about it.
For now, Ronald Hayes is the only person living in Patriot Place, but Hayes says he looks forward to seeing his neighbors enjoy the same feeling he got when he opened the doors to his dream. Micah Smith, News Channel 11, in your corner.
The Eastern Aid Executive Directors, as Micah mentioned, people from around the country are watching and trying to figure out how to build something like Patriot Place in their area. Some of those organizations will visit the development next week on April 1st and 2nd. Mark?
So the lots are subsidized with the SHOP grant loan program, and then Home Depot stepped in at their Home Depot Foundation and provides a $25,000 contribution to each of the homeowners. So the gentleman that was interviewed, his mortgage is less than $70,000. And we have currently, at last count, 14 veterans that live there now. And it's in a very peaceful, as you can tell, rural area. He says deer come through his yard, and we wanted to be tranquil.
Bill? She came here sick and she All right, well, I'm going to stand up just because I want to move around a little bit. But Community Action is a social service provider. We've been providing services for over 50 years in the western mountain area of Maine. It covers 3 counties. To the west is Oxford, and underneath that to the south is Androscoggin. We have many services, as all community action agencies have. So we have career and training services, women, infant, and children. We have child food, senior food. We also have the low-income community assistance program, LIHEAP, fuel assistance. And then we have my program, which is the housing and energy, which is weatherization and home repair and heat. We do everything from the septic, the ramps, to all the way up to the roofs for repairs. In recent times, well, when I first started with 2009, I'm glad I had a chance to talk about it, but it was crazy. It was the time during when ERA was in play. It was American Reinvestment Act. It was crazy, Recovery and Reinvestment Act. And I had to learn on the fly. We did about 225 weatherizations just in that little blue dot is. That's a county the size, bigger than the state of Rhode Island, and about 30,000 people there. And it was kind of neat for me to see that with that kind of energy savings, we were saving about 80,000 gallons of oil a year, which transferred to about $320,000 at 77 cents a gallon back at that time. But what I found when I was doing all that was the folks who needed the help the most, they were the highest energy users, the highest energy burden. They were the lowest income. They had housing that was substandard, and it killed me. I mean, I'm a pretty passionate guy, and I just said, like, wow, there's got to be something we can do about this. So, you know, we do have a home repair program, and it's gotten bigger, but the assistance I've gotten from the HAC, from the Housing Assistance Council, and then through the Home Depot Foundation allowed me to kind of focus some things on veterans. Now, this project that we did, and we had to transfer it into home repairs, but I'm showing this project on the next scene, next slide, which is something that was originally designated for a veteran, and it will be happening this next fall of 2018 for a veteran's home. The eligibility fell out on some of my other funding, so I had to shift gears. But the idea came from HAC, and the idea came from the Home Depot Foundation. That was my seed for my creativity. I'm going to let the film speak. It's only 4 minutes, and hopefully you can hear it. If you can, I'll shout it out for you. We'll let it.
Well, it's been what? About 3 years since the roof started leaking. Yeah. The trailer walls would get cold and they'd sweat and then they'd mold and you'd have to wash them down. The squirrels got into the roof and I cleaned out all our insulation.
So it's pretty cold in the winter now.
This couple had come to Western Maine Community Action only looking for some help with putting a roof on their home. That was their only request, and instead it really needed to be a replacement home project.
I'm a firm believer in when one door closes, another one opens.
Partnering with the Foster Technical High School and a whole community of partners, we broke ground on this new home just 10 feet away from Joe and Pam's original house.
Most kids wouldn't really think they could go out and build a house as a kid. It takes a lot to be able to have the patience to stick with it, even on the coldest of days or the hottest. It's learning how to work with everything you have.
I wanted a program that we could assist low-income folks while the young kids learned the cutting edge of energy technology building. The Maine Community Foundation's support was very critical. It doubled the amount of money that we could put towards this project. It also added a lot of legitimate attention to this project.
They worked really hard. It has been fascinating watching it.
So watch out the window there in the cold and watch them. Boy, they did a heck of a job. Awful good.
Knowing that they're gonna live there and that I'm actually building a house is like spectacular. I wouldn't have thought I've been able to do this in high school.
It's all Energy Star efficient.
Airtight.
It will have a heat pump and it will have an air recovery system that will keep the moisture out of the house, fresh air coming in, old air going out at all times.
They said you should be able to heat it with just a candle on the table.
I would like to think that they're going to have the sense of feeling that, you know, their health will be better. They're not going to be worried about being cold, going through 10 cords of wood. So that's going to be awesome for them.
It's going to be kind of sad to see the old house go, but in the end, it's going to be a lot better for us.
I'm ready to move in.
We wanted to figure out a way to keep the people aging in place, keeping them safe and keeping them warm. And I think that we found it. There are vocational schools across the state. There are vocational schools across the nation. There's no reason why this model couldn't be utilized everywhere.
We just enjoyed living here. It's what we've always wanted.
The next question, I'll address the veteran side of it, but we noticed that you know, we've always been very interested in keeping our seniors in their home. We have a lot of older folks in Franklin County, a lot of veterans. We have 12% of veterans in Maine. And these guys are going to fact check me over here. So, and Franklin County has somewhere around 16 or 17%, I think. And in our LIHEAP data, the low-income folks, we're also showing about 17%, and they're about 17% on our home repair list. We have over 200 home repair applications. We have like over 20 home replacements on top of that. We have, and I won't go into the more detailed data until the next question, but I think this is a great thing. That this is something that where the kids can come and learn that there's 70% of these kids are low income themselves. It's a school program. Only work 3 hours a day. It's set up so it'll start in the fall and then sometimes late spring. Well, in Maine, you gotta have to deal with the snow. And these kids shoveled off 8 feet of snow, but that house got done. It was a great thing. These folks, we aimed with a HUD counselor. We tried to make sure these folks had a 30% or less of their housing costs. And so in Maine, they only assess the house in April, so we kind of got a bridge year. But for this year, their home mortgage is $165 a month. Their mortgage will not be any more than $250 a month after it's fully assessed. they told me today, I called them up and I said, Joe, what's your electric bill? He said, well, you know, Bill, it went down $20 down a month down after we moved out of the old place. Now you got to remember, they're heating that place with 10 cords of wood and a barrel of oil. So their energy costs are already going down just on the electrical use. And that includes the heat pump, which is their heat and air conditioning. So I won't go on much longer, but I really think it's a good model. And I've been really hounding my state funders that have the federal funds and state programs to really back this up so it's an annual thing. HAC has been really supportive in the things that we've done with home repair with some of their money, and I'll go into that detail in a little bit, but that's where it is. Thank you, Home Depot, for that.
Now then, Mr. Chairman, go to you or working whoever's.
Okay, I'll go first. It's a White Mountain Apache Housing Authority located in Arizona, in a remote area, 4 hours east of Phoenix. We are in the boonies, you might say, per se. Okay, on this one, the veterans home rehab program we have, we're able to assist 9 veterans and their families since 2012. Okay. And Home Depot, the USDA, the White Mountain Apache Housing Authority, and the Wells Fargo, they all contribute funds for this special project. So that's for them. So I'd like to thank Home Depot, USDA, and Wells Fargo for their generosity. Next slide, on this slide here, they awarded 2 veterans per year, and they had to be enrolled members who are troubled veterans. Now with increased grant fund, we're able to award a handful of veterans applicants. This veteran right here showing, his name is Carlos Lupe. He fought in World War II, Korean, and Vietnam. He's the most decorated veteran on a reservation, our reservation. He's 93 years old, and he like awarded Silver Stars, Purple Heart. I think he mostly name and combat. He got it. So he's 93. He's one of the veterans that we rehab the homes. Okay, next. And here are some of the pictures that we rehab. And they had to, in order to get in the program, they had to be a veteran, complete an application. They had the ID, general ID, and full military photo, and proof of the White Mountain Apache enrollment. You had to be a tribal enrollment. And the new criteria we had put on is that we test home for rehab now before for drug combination as for the meth. We got a high population, we get in a meth, a lot of homes, so we start testing for meth now before we rehab the home. So if they have rehab, but a lot of them had tested out, came with positive results. We come with a positive result, so we started doing tests for meth on this program now. Next slide. So here's some of the money we get from the fund that we receive. Like Wells Fargo, they contribute like $15,000, and Home Depot $30,000, and USDA rule $47,000. This is a new one, and the White Mountain Apache Housing Authority put in $15,000. So for a total of like $107,000 per applicant. Now we do 2 applicants per year, so a total is $214,000 for 2 applicants. So and is in the picture say each applicant they receive one brand new appliance of their choice. So there's Dorothy will take that.
And I just wanted to say a little on what Curtis is saying. He's saying 2 applicants per year and talk about a diverse community. Where we come from, I mean, dilapidated is, when we say a home is dilapidated, I don't know what you have in mind, what dilapidated is to you, but seriously, from the reservation and what we see, it's just a home that not even worth living in. And it's really, it saddens us because these are veterans that live in there. So we have some before and after photos that we wanted to share so you can see what we're talking about. This one right here, the blue area. That home, I believe, was like 50 or 60 years old. And when I spoke with one of the, I've been there 3 years. This was more like 5 years ago. But when I got with the our development department person that took care of this, he says it was really sad because this gentleman, he's deceased now, and it's so sad because after he got moved into his home, I think he enjoyed it like six months at the most. But he passed, and he's gosh, I believe he was like in his 90s also. But the home he lived in did not have running water. The walls were mold, floor tiles were out, holes in the ceiling. His wood stove, there was a crack, and he couldn't use it. I mean, very, very a sad situation. But it was renovated. This one right here where it says before and after. Okay, the after one, that's the photo before where we'd seen the a family in their by the refrigerator with smiles. Okay, that, if we can go back to the
one slide.
Yeah, go
Slide
back
back.
one.
Right
That
there.
one. This family is our first. She's a widow of a Vietnam vet. So she was the first one, right, Nicole? The first, that, a widow of a vet. Okay. So, and they've been able to help even them, and I believe there's another one in line. And see, the old, I guess we come here stating that anything we can do for our veteran, this one, he's pretty modest, and he won't say, but he is also a decorated vet. We had his bio here, and I would like, can I share that with them really quick? I know we only have, I know he's gonna say, okay.
Concentrate right here. Don't lose your focus.
Okay. But please be modest, I told you that. Okay, go ahead. Next one. And this one right here is a rehab with our veteran. The one right by the pole, right there in the white shirt, little like the bluefies, are a tribal member and a tribal council member. That's Everett Massey right there. And the 5 that we have assisted right there: Augustine Cattle, Callis Lupi, Jimmy Antonio, Everett Massey, and Gregory Kinney. And then we have 4 more to add to the name. But this family, they were so humble. They were just so happy to be back into their new homes. And I think they had 2 of their grandkids living with them. And one of the workers were telling me the little grandkids were just running around, jumping for joy when they'd seen the new home. You know, those are the things that we see. And we wanted to share that with you. And that's the renovation that was done. The next one, I believe, see the blue on top before? That was really, really one of the disastrous. I mean, it was really, I guess you would say you wouldn't want any of your family members to live in there. But they were able to renovate, and even the sidings they fixed, and new appliances right there to the left, the bottom left. So they've done a great job, and like our executive director says, we just cannot thank HAC enough. Home Depot, Wells Fargo, as well as the workers. We have Wells Fargo that volunteer also, so we're very thankful for that. And then I think there's one more, right? Okay. This is the list that Mr. Curtis gave us. 651 tribal members on our reservation, Waimanalo Apache tribes, have our veterans, and those are his breakdowns. But what I wanted to share with you, out of the 651, our tribal enrollment is 16.8. Out of the 16.8, you look at the 651 tribal veterans, that's like 30%, almost 30%. So that we feel like, you know, our enrollment is really high. And now I know he doesn't want me to say anything, but Curtis's bio we had shared, and if I can just
I
really
was
quick.
looking for that guy for data. Where is he at? Because he mentioned some. Okay. Yeah, he mentioned some county too. Our reservation is broken down. We in three counties. We're in Navajo County, Gila County, and Apache County. So, but you know that fund we get, we don't really get any fund for those counties to help the veterans. So you know, there's you know, he looked down at the percentage-wise, probably very low. Just like to bring up the counties here, because somebody mentioned county a while ago.
And the information that we've seen, you know, it's really helpful and it's really interesting. And I was going to ask, you know, will this be emailed to us? Can we have all the information?
And by the way, she was working in the housing. That's the reason why she's sitting here, because she's been working in housing like 36, almost 40 years.
3 years.
Almost 40 years.
I've been
30 some years.
I was just rehired 3 years ago. Okay.
About 30 some years. That's why.
Yeah, 36 years with Housing Authority. But I just wanted to share this bio really quick here. But he's with the.
Did you lose focus?
But he served in the U.S. Marines, 25 years of faithful commitment to the service. He's at Staff Academy School for Sergeant school drill, a drill instructor, and he still thinks he's doing that. In San Diego, he's really with the community back home. He's a district community president, a tribal election commission, land restoration committee, Eastport Lutheran Church member and school board, tribal transportation committee member, tribal social services committee, Veterans Association, American Legion, land office board, and the White Mountain Apache Housing Authority board chairperson.
I guess I didn't learn my lesson in Rico. They told us never volunteer, but I guess I volunteered.
I think they called us all. Thank you. Appreciate that. Moving on, just to kind of look from here. This is for all of you also. From a general affording housing development, please talk to us about how your organization transitioned to focus on veteran housing or housing geared towards aging veterans. That's Chairman and I and Joe. We're aging veterans.
Well, for us, it was, so we were a housing developer. We were, at the point we got into this conversation, we had probably built maybe 200 homes. And about that time was the HUD emphasis on forming continuum of cares, which I'm assuming everyone is familiar with. And so we became very, very involved in the continuum of care, helped organize the continuum of care, was a strong participant in it. And of course, all you heard was the needs. And so we jumped into, okay, we're the bricks and mortar. We will meet your housing needs. And so we started going after funding and building units that would be primarily geared at homelessness. And then that kind of naturally flowed over into veterans. Our community has a top-ranked Veterans Administration hospital in it, and it draws veterans there that are disabled, et cetera. And so we have a pretty strong concentration, and therefore the homeless veterans population is pretty strong in our area. And we had really strong number count points in time, and our congressman got involved, which hopefully, is he still coming today? Do we know?
No, he's not. Okay. Staff is coming.
Well, I hate that. But anyway, our congressman got real involved, and at that time the VASH vouchers came out, and it all just kind of presented opportunities for all this to come together. So we started out in rental units, and then again the need just kind of rolled over into providing home ownership. Interestingly enough, from key statistics, we are dealing more with the veterans from the Vietnam veteran. Since we're rural, that was an interesting topic, that with the rural, you have the older veterans. And so of the veterans that we're assisting in the homeownership, most of them, I would say probably 80% are older Vietnam era veterans. We experienced some, what you might say, NIMBYism. When we planned this community, it started out in one community, and they were very supportive to begin with. And then when you're like, okay, we're going to do it here, the neighbors start saying, well, why don't you do it over there? And so we started having community meetings when they were like, well, we support the veterans, we just don't want to have it here. And I think they were afraid of just fears, the unknown fears, that post-traumatic stress, having guns in the neighborhood. I think if we were trying to even do it now, I think with all the violence in the news, I think it would be very interesting to see how that's going to play out in future home development, because I ran into it, 10 years ago. What's it going to be like now? But people back then were scared of just, I don't know what's going to move in next door. I don't want, So we moved it to another county. We had to move all of our funding to another county, which was traumatic in itself. And then that community was more supportive. We did more marketing. We kind of hit it head on, that veterans do need help. They are normal. They're just like everyone else. They need help. We put them on the news. It was in the newspaper. And we got the community support at that point and moved forward. So the community from then has experienced a lot of support. The county mayor is supportive, but it also brought a lot of new partners that we were not familiar with in the housing world. Typically, a partner to us would have been Lowe's or Home Depot for lumber supplies, but working in the veterans population, and especially homeless veterans, and just transitioning that whole continuum of care and the whole circle of life, we found that we had to get partnerships with mental health providers and insurance and healthcare providers. These are not normally conversations you have in the housing world. If you're a houser, you're a houser. You just don't have those conversations. And I would have to say that kind of in a good way, getting involved in the veterans has opened up those doors to so many more opportunities that once you get into this opportunity, it's like, oh my gosh, then that opened 10 more doors. And kind of as an aside, we just partnered with our state's Medicare program as a result of all these other doors falling into place, that we just did a Medicare project. Then that would not have happened if it had not been, I don't think, for all these other things kind of falling into place. And so it also brought us more in contact with the congressman's office. Many housers don't go to the congressman. We got more involved with the VA, and the VA was quite challenging. There is a lot of people at the VA, and when you're not a veteran and you're not familiar, I would have to say I probably talked to 20 people in the VA before you finally got to the right person. And then even then, I wish they would have been more cooperative, because what I really wanted to do was build a community that would meet their needs, but then no one was really telling me what their needs were. So I have to say, initially we kind of developed the project in the blind with not a lot of feedback from people that you would think you could get feedback from. But we do have transportation worked out. Our subdivision is about, I want to say 6 miles from the VA, and they provide transportation to the vets. So it all got worked out. It was just a really challenging process throughout that.
Yeah, she made a statement that's very, very true, is VA is hard to work with. You know, Terry and I just met with them yesterday, so we're working on processes that hopefully will, you know, advance us looking into veterans issues here. So,
and I would like to add one more thing, that actually in my area, with it being rural, we did more with USDA mortgages instead of VA mortgages, because the VA mortgage, it has a good interest rate, but if you're a veteran can qualify for a USDA, the 502 loan, it's a better interest rate. And since ours was in rural, all of our veterans actually have a 502 loan.
Yeah. And just for you, Chairman, all Indian reservations qualify as ruled under USDA 502. All right, Bill.
Yeah, just a note on that 502. The home that you saw there was had a 502 loan as well, and it was 38 years at 2.875%. Pretty good deal. And it wasn't on the full amount. There's a deferred forgivable on some of the grants and so forth. Western Maine Community Action came to the veteran thing slightly different. We knew we were serving veterans in our area. Maine has 123,000 veterans roughly, and about 12%. And we found that Franklin County was about the same, but our LIHEAP data was, before we knew it, was about the same, 12%. But we didn't have any way of identifying them. So after meeting up with the PAC, we started keeping data. We actually, when we did the LIHEAP data intake, we did a supplemental survey that asked several questions, and some of it was broken down so we would know what kind of service these folks the veterans were dealing with. And you'll see this out on the table. There's a veteran sheet. Now, last year we had a home repair program, and we did 32 households of veterans. And we took money, and what community actions are really good at is leveraging funds. And we were able to get for every dollar, we were able to get $5.50 back out in investments. So it was really, really a great thing. And one of the things that was interesting is that we were able to also grab some of the demographics data that was grabbed by a state department in connection with that LIHEAP data and the supplemental veterans data. So that's how we came to that. We also found it really made a lot more interesting things, because Maine has 47% of our veterans in the state are over the age of 65. Well, and you guys data checking that? Because that was last year. But with our LIHEAP folks, the data we had on them, of the ones that responded, was 55% of our veterans were over 65 in the low income. And there's 17% of our veterans on the home repair applications. The ones that in the projects we did, because of the leverage funding, we were able to do 32% of the projects were veterans, and they received 37% of the funding. So for an average for veterans home repair was $6,800 versus the other applicant about $5,600. So there's $1,200 difference per average. And I think it just speaks really good, because we were able to leverage those federal dollars a whole lot better when we had a focus such as the federal for the veterans, and it's in some of our federal programs, it's okay to leverage that if they meet other eligibilities like elders and so forth. So that's how we came to that. And this data, I just want to point, this data sheet's out there, and this is the abstract for that home replacement program that we had used, which definitely includes some sort of a loan program for the folks to own some of them. You got to hit me. You can't just use those little signs. That's not going to stop me.
No, it's really good. And Chairman, I mean, you kind of answered this question before when you say 30% of your population is veterans. Yeah. It just kind of it really hits home. And I would like to say that, you know, being Native myself and everything else, that a large portion of our veterans are Native. They really are. It's, you know, that's just common among us. We don't even think about it. We just go and then live and here we go. So that's very common. So yeah.
And I think another thing is that living on the reservation itself, the Fort Apache Indian Reservation, the service is very not there, you know, for veterans.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have a service, American Legion on the reservation, but the outreaching program is not really active. And the closest service where we can get a little service like Sholo, called Sholo, about 80 miles away. And a lot of veterans don't have a transportation. And the closest one where you get a VA appointment, something like that, is Phoenix or Prescott, which is like 4 or 5 hours drive. So we are very in a remote area, remoteness type, you know. And so for if you live on my reservation, you are luck, because the agent veteran, we in the process of planning right now to find out, you know, I don't know where they're going to put me when I get a me agent veteran, you know. I don't know. It's up to Dorothy what you're going to do. Right? But we're in the process of planning for like the veterans, you know, and because Dorothy can check more on that.
Yeah, Curtis had mentioned planning for our veterans. Right now we have an area where it's set aside for the elderly and handicapped. But there's talk to where, okay, we'll set maybe 5 units aside or 10 aside just for the veterans. That's in the works, that's in discussions. So, and that's where I'm going to put them.
but you know, like we really need a lot of funding. You know, we are limited resource and things like that. But what we have, we work to try to work with the veterans. Right now we're doing a rehabbing program and for aging veterans. So you better hurry up and get us the funds so you can put me over there.
Well, this question is just for you, Chairman. Have either of you been successful in coordinating with the VA department to make a use of an individual veterans guarantee loan? Where did you start to make the connection or form the relationship?
Oh, we're talking about not putting down the VA, but it's very hard to work with. They've got a lot of requirements, you know, especially coming to resident. I know we have MOU. Let me go down. He said the tribe has MOU set in place with the veterans, but we had a lot of low income veterans, and I know in the process you had to apply yourself with the bank to get a loan, although you get that guarantee loan, and like kind of transportation wise and just getting the people over there to do service net. I have tried, but there's a lot of requirements that, you know, like the home, that the wall got to be this thick and the foundation had to be this and that. So, you know, to me, a lot of people get frustrated because there's paperwork, and they get a lot of frustrated. And that's what I see our veterans doing that. Now, I know we have a program, we try to help them work with the paperwork, but they just, you know, we did a lot of World War II and Vietnam too, the veterans, and they just not into it, especially paperwork. And so dealing with the VA program, the individual home care loan, I don't think we might have one or two, but I don't believe so, because it's unheard of.
Yeah.
It's unheard of.
Well, just to get back to our data people here, we just wrote, or they just wrote, we. Hey, I'm still part of that. But you know, they were doing some research on Native veterans, and out of the 373 tribes that have trust land, only like 22 loans in a 2-year period. Wow. You know, I mean, and we're talking about our people that are 30% of our population probably are veterans, you know, just going off of White Mountain. And that's not even reasonable.
I just want, so I was on Pine Ridge Reservation, and they used the VA funding, but of course it's also income driven.
Mm-hmm.
So the younger veterans, they built 3 homes in actually Pine Ridge.
Right.
But when we start dealing with the older veterans that were out on the reservation that didn't have income, they did qualify because they had 850 credit scores,
mm-hmm.
but they only qualified for $10,000,
right.
which you can't do anything with.
Right.
And that was the problem that we were finding on Pine Ridge. I don't know.
Yeah.
So somewhere is moving down to Phoenix area, closer to the service, you know, the VA and things like that, and so they can work with it, and the younger ones, you know, but like I said, the older ones we stay on reservations, and so the service, like we got a lot of service connected people, and they don't really apply for the benefits either.
Yeah, right. So the loan is a good option for the younger veterans, but the older veterans that tend to be on the reservation in the more rural areas, it's not a solution.
Well, and also we have to look at, I work with 22 tribes, so I get quite a variation here. But most of our veterans come out of service. They're not mortgage savvy. You know, we grew up and mortgages only came on the reservation in 1993 or 4, I forget when it was. And so they're not mortgage savvy. When I was working with vets, I know I was working with Mr. Chino back probably 6 or 7 years ago, and he didn't understand all this paperwork. So I was talking to VA for him. And VA told me to get off the phone and put the vet on, that it was none of my business. So, we have those types of challenges. And I actually brought this up to VA yesterday when Shantaria and I were up there. It's like, we have to have a dialogue where we can assist the veteran, whether it's on the non-reservation or reservation. They have to accept that there are people here that understand it, that is working with the vet. And so that's a big important part of doing it right there. And so it's just something that I'm very passionate about, I guess, because I go in and I say my piece, and whether it makes them mad or not, but it's the truth.
Yeah, it's really different living on a reservation and living in Phoenix or other areas where there's a big difference.
Yeah. And for all of you that don't know, when we're on the reservation, we have a different set of rules than the rest of you. Instead of title work, we have title status reports. And how many of you guys have bought a house and had to have NEPA requirements to build a house? None. But we have to have them on the reservation. How many of you have to have an archaeological review before you can build?
Oh, Lord.
None of you, but we have to have that on the reservation. This is the big difference between on reservation and off. And these are high dollar things. If you have to hire somebody to do an environmental review to build one house, my word, and we have infrastructure challenges because we're rural, and we're really rural. It's not like, I live 5 miles from town. The nearest bank from my office is 45 miles. That's the closest bank. And I'm sure it's further than that from you guys, So we have these different challenges, but this is what we have to do. We have to look at VA, we have to look at USDA, we have to look at all these different components just to build houses on the reservation. And rural, I will say rural, not just reservations. We have to look at this totally for rural America, because us being rural is not a popular thing anywhere. So that's my passion. Sorry. I can keep going on and on, but it needs to be rural and native, because we have different issues on our reservations than we do off reservation, and it makes it a little bit more difficult. Plus, like I said, our veterans they're not financial savvy about all this stuff. This is, And when you get out of the service, they don't explain it to you. You know, they say you have these benefits, but they don't explain it to you. And I've had many of people come to me with a COE, a certificate of eligibility, saying, where do I sign to get my money? You know, it's that type of thing. So we've got to look at that, and then plus the supportive services of us getting older. You know, that's another biggie. And if you know anybody that's a veteran that has ALS, have them go down and sign up right now. There's all sorts of support, and it's presumptive. So it's definitely a benefit that very few vets know about.
Well, we use the VA loans in the rural areas, in the urban areas.
Right.
And then, because you can't use the rural development ones. And so the ones that are in the eligible area, we typically, it's just much more beneficial for the buyer to go the 502 route because they subsidize the loans down to even 1%.
Yeah. Okay. Now that I've probably ran over my time. All right, guys, what are some of the best practices or other advice you can offer that would help us guide others as they seek to increase and expand service delivery to housing or service provisions for veterans? And I think that's what we've been talking about already.
Some of the best practices that I would share is like to seek out other groups and learn and share, like even coming today, like some of you. Certainly where I learned mine from my network of friends, partnerships. So that's probably the best advice I can give anyone. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. No need for that at all. And then develop partnerships for services that you don't provide. Like I know I'm a houser and I'm going to stay in my sandbox. So instead of getting in your sandbox, I'm going to build a house and I'm going to partner with the service providers. So if we all do what we're good at, then you can partner and really build a much more stronger sense of networking. And then, I don't know, like ask veterans what they need. You know, sometimes we just impose on everybody, what do you think we need? But, you know, answering really where the needs are. It's funny that they come to us for a roof, but then we go to their house and go, how are you living here? You know, but I also think in rental, this is homeownership, but in rental, I have much higher turnover rates. So if you're going into rental, you should expect that. And I don't know, I don't have any, do you have any statistics on that?
Cost burden a lot more challenging.
But I'm experiencing higher turnover rates, higher for some reason with veterans. And also that means higher make-ready cost on the landlord. If you, they need 100% funding because of, they haven't saved for down payments. Nobody does, but you need to be able to have some money for that. And you've got to kind of become an expert on VA services. You've got to find that right person, no matter how long it takes, and actually develop a relationship with them, because you actually want to become their go-to person. You want them to call you and say, oh, I've got blah, 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 blah. And finally, support groups that are out there. Like she mentioned, things like the VFW, the AMVETS. In our area, we have something called the TriMac. Reach out to any of those veteran support groups and form partnerships with them. And again, it just seems to make everyone stronger, and you're meeting more needs that way.
Thank you. Bill?
There's several things I would recommend. When we first started, we were worried about elderly folks and trying to keep them in their home. And the reason being is because when we were looking at the cost of home repair for an average per unit, even if the veteran's at 68, $100 for an average, a month of residential care because they fell down a bad set of steps or fell into the tub and put their hip out. I have a brother-in-law who's a vet, and I've been in service for over 30 years, and he's paying private pay at $7,500 a month. So for me, it was a personal thing of trying to save the taxpayers' money and make sure that we can put that money into keeping people home where they want to be. But then the data guys came around and brought me into the reality of how important it is for the outcomes, to be able to report them. And so we started doing the data collections that mirrored what Keith and his team have done, and it really does a great job of doing output for funders. I think that's important for them to see what kind of goals have been reached, and what kind of demographics you're dealing with. For example, I know now of the ones that responded of the 32% of the home repairs we did last year, 45% of them were Vietnam veterans, and in our area, it's 36% is kind of a veteran age. So we're above in that group. And the other thing that I would recommend is scoring your home repair applications. If you're doing that, we were doing a home replacement, but home repair is so critical to keeping the homes that can be repaired. But by doing that, we were able to give extra points for veterans. We were able to give extra points for elderly, low income, very low income. The nature of the repair that needed to be done, whether it's an emergency, backed up septic, anything like that, those sort of things came into place. And then I think reaching out to as many community partners as you can. In our case, we went out to the local high school where they had vocational tech courses going on, but we also reached out to private businesses that were very supportive. There was a whole list of them there, and private foundations. Until I'm hopeful we can get sustainable funding from our state funders that are traditional home repair funders, and I'm almost there. So, but that's where I'm at, and then making it a program that you can do every year, like you have at your place, and being able to do it annually, I think is important because it keeps that pipeline going. And making a pipeline of work, it's slow, but if you have a whole pipeline coming through, you can get a lot done over time.
Okay. Ours, I think what she mentioned, like the opportunity is there, but we have to do a lot of networking, coming together like this and see where the opportunity is for networking and funding, things like that. And the data person, I really like what they said, community data, because I know you probably kind of a little upset with the hot vest. We applied for a couple of times, but we lack data. So because our neighbors, St. Carlos Apache tribe, they got the hot vest because they really, I think they had the data they dedicated to the, on Veterans Day, they had Veterans Parade and all that stuff. Our tribe, we're not doing that. So we need more data input, and not only because we're remote areas, but we need to do more on our side. We need to, like networking that you mentioned, and apply for more grant. And you got anything else?
Yeah, I think Curtis touched it. The main thing that we said was current and updated data. If anything, that that speaks a lot.
I'd say that, and I'm just going to reemphasize, I think all the federal programs are going more and more towards data. So I've done the COC application for the past 8 years, and the amount of words that you put in has dramatically shrunk, and now it's all pull this from your database, pull it from your, and the SSBF that just dropped recently, it's moving in the same direction. We have no one, I shouldn't say no one, very few people probably signed up on the social services side to collect the data, but it is one thing that can dramatically tell the story. And it's, if that is your major funder, that's what they're going to ask us for.
Very true. But I just wanted to add one thing. You just talked about renters and how they move. Well, a couple of years ago, I was moderating this VA conference, and Purple Heart was there. And one of the questions I asked was how they dealt with the veterans that were constantly moving. And I said, because when I got out, I couldn't stay in any one place very long. I had to keep moving. And so it goes to your deal. It was PTSD, you know, and I didn't even realize it. And that was 40, 50 years ago, you know, and I didn't even realize it until we had that conversation, you know. So you have to look at a lot of other aspects on housing besides just, hey, he doesn't have a house. You know, I had problems that I didn't even know I had until just recently. And it wouldn't have done any good for me to get a home ownership house because I wouldn't have stayed there, you know, that type of thing. So we have to look at all these situations besides just home ownership, because there's going to be some of us that require, we don't need to be homeowners, we need to be renters. And that's part of our situation. So I just want to throw that in. That's part of it. Okay. Okay. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Yeah, I was gonna get any input from on the presentation so far. Nothing? Okay. No. Christopher, you want to?
Sure. And lots of great input here, and lots that I think rings bells from our experience at Habitat and implementing our Veterans Build program. And please, my colleagues will jump in and correct me where I'm wrong about where we are today as opposed to when we were creating the program a few years back. But I think, I think the question about kind of moving from a general affordable housing development into a veteran focus was something that we had to look at very carefully at Habitat, and wasn't the easiest thing for us to figure out at first. And ultimately, it was about self-awareness in a very large way. We didn't even understand how many veterans we had leading Habitat affiliates, working at Habitat affiliates, volunteering at Habitat affiliates, not to mention our veteran homeowners who were living in the communities where we were building. So part of it was just becoming self-aware of what an important piece of our work veterans already were, and figuring out how do we make sure that we're much more intentional about incorporating them into our work and recognizing that role that they play. So that was very, very important. And I think you kind of can't underestimate the communications piece. We found out that we had to talk about ourselves in a very different way when we were connecting with the veteran community, that the way that we kind of marketed ourselves, again, not just to homeowners, potential homeowners, but to volunteers, potential employees, it didn't necessarily come through to veterans all the time. And when we were able to tune those messages, mostly by talking to our veterans who were already part of the organization and listening to them about how we could do a better job of talking about our work, we were able to get past that and get launched. I think the partnership piece that several people have mentioned is absolutely critical. Not trying to get out of your own expertise and become something that you're not. Habitat for Humanity is a home ownership provider and a home repair organization, and that's what we need to continue to do. But we also understand that our homeowners need more than just a home repair a lot of the time, and that we can be a critical point for making those connections for them. And I'd also say, as difficult as the VA can be to be a partner, we have seen certainly some areas around the country where affiliates have built incredibly strong partnerships with the local VA hospital, often again by leveraging the veterans who are already involved with that organization to help them make those connections, or to other veteran organizations that are already working in the community community and have connections with the VA. There are ways to go about it. And again, it's not easy and it's not going to work everywhere, but I think that those have been some powerful partnerships for us. But I think the thing that I heard more than anything and that I've observed at Habitat is all of the ancillary benefits that the organization derives from engaging with the veteran population and understanding the role that veterans play. And, you know, just a few of the things that have been mentioned. You know, Bill mentioned training the students and building that relationship where you were both serving the veterans and helping another area of the community that needs support. And I think just the relationships that are built in doing these projects have all kinds of potential benefits like that. I think, you know, I spend the bulk of my time on advocacy, and if you want to get a member of Congress's attention, walk in and tell him that you have veterans working for you, that you're providing them volunteer opportunities to connect with their community, that you're providing them housing opportunities. That has provided Habitat the opportunity to have much broader conversations about the work that we do and the impact that we're having, and frankly, how we're using programs that are broader than veterans to serve veterans. So some of those HUD programs that we use, we're leveraging in important ways to serve the veteran community, and that helps us better make the case for those programs and provides better support for our affiliates across the board by understanding it. I think, you know, the USDA 502 program is a very important program at Habitat as well. I think the more that we can talk about how veterans are being served through the 502 Direct program, the better off that program is going to be. And it's enormously important in rural areas. The guaranteed program can't get down to the kind of interest rates that you need to reach the populations that need it, just kind of like the VA guaranteed program can't sometimes. So another example of how that can be, that those veteran focus and veteran relationships and service can really broaden impact and improve the organization. I think it's for Habitat. It's really been a great step forward, not just in terms of serving the veteran community, but better understanding ourselves and better serving the communities that we serve broadly and not just regarding to the veterans. David, did you no. David was, it didn't take me long in working on the task force that was designing our veteran program to understand that a veteran would do a much better job of implementing that than I ever would. And so we were very lucky to have David, who's brought on additional veterans to implement that program. And so I would say having veterans involved in implementing these programs is one of the most important things that we've done.
I think I appreciate I think we're all in the same boat. We've seen these, we have these happening, we have similar programs all around the country. I think the bottom line issue is the sustainable capacity of funding to do the work. The variation in funding for repairs versus new home construction is a big challenge. I did want to kind of ask, and anecdotally, the 504 program, USD 504 for rural housing, the challenge that I've been hearing about when I've actually been talking to USDA folks and communities is the tremendous backlog. So what's meant for critical home repairs, I know I talked to one in rural Alabama, and they were working on stuff from early first quarter 2016. So that critical home repair is just now getting assessed, or the project's getting reviewed, and that kind of moves out of that space. Do any of y'all use 504?
Yeah, it's the same. I applied for one. It took me 2 years to get it. Yeah. You know.
So which drives us to the other sources, and the challenge with at least the new home construction, the USDA 502 allows us to continually reintegrate the funding into building new home construction.
Right.
But the repair space is a much more difficult because it's those places where the people don't have a repayment capacity. So you're trying to find direct grants to do the work to make that home habitable, which means you need a continued source to do the work. And I think that's our.
You know, they just don't fund it in the quantity that
No.
we need.
We can get like 90,000.
Yeah, and
Right.
it just doesn't work because by the time you go down and apply for it and do the paperwork, which is this thick to even apply for it, they're out of money. You know, I mean, it's that. So you have to sit there and wait until, and like I said, for this one, it was for one of our native elders, and she didn't have heat. And I fronted the money for it, and I figured I'll get it back. It took me 2 years to get it back from USDA. So it was like, okay, but at least she didn't freeze to death. I'll put it that way.
We did a 502 loan as well, and part of the reason for that is because some of our other state funding requires that application to be done first before they get into the game, and that they have to be eligible for that 502 grant, or they have to be eligible for 502 loan for a new home, or they won't support the funding.
For repair?
Not for the repair, but for the replacement. They'll do it for the repair, they'll do a grant, but you gotta do the 502 loan to be denied to get the grant money.
Yeah.
So what we did with ours is, it's true. You have to do it. I mean, a lot of paperwork that goes along with it.
40 pages late.
Yeah, or more. But one thing, the couple I worked with, they had talking about an annual income of about $17,000, and there's not a lot of money between two of them in medical costs and other things. And to get, we try to focus on that 30%, but we actually got down to about 17% of their income is now going towards that housing cost. And really, it's turned out way better than I thought. And I think going forward, we're going to really have even better returns. So.
And we've had a lot of luck with our Huntington Habitat has a program in conjunction with the VA hospital in the BASH, where they're taking veterans who were on BASH in 12 months crisis free, and then in partnership with the Housing Authority, convert that BASH voucher into a housing choice voucher, which pays the mortgage.
Yeah.
So these were all formerly homeless veterans who moved into the VA, the VASH program, and then came into that. But it's all dependent on the VASH vouchers availability in your particular community. And of course, there's a finite number of those, and they're limited to the footprints around VA hospitals because they have to have that counseling component.
Right.
So a lot of when you start talking about a rural housing solution, it kind of falls out.
Yeah.
Bring that back up when the staffer shows up to note today.
Yeah. And this is a little bit beyond just single family housing, but supportive housing.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I've looked at this for a couple times for a couple of different restorations. Is we have veterans that need the supportive housing, the medical and everything right there, so that they're not traveling 50, 60 miles one way to maybe get into VA. How do we set up maybe some 1 to 4 complexes with supportive housing, and how we fund that? So that's something else that has been on my mind, and I haven't figured it out yet, but it's got to be there because, like I said, most of us, vets that are getting kind of gray on top here, we're there. It might be sooner than later, so it's another thing that we have to look at.
Yeah, my dad, he had to drive like an hour and almost 2 hours to get to a VA to get his eyes fixed. And he had cataracts, and he couldn't, and it was on a wait list, and it just got crazy. He's gonna, by the time he finally gets in, he won't be able to drive to get there. Yeah. And so he had to get somebody to go with him to go, because it's a long drive.
Yeah. I did want to, the partnering pieces, I think, is another critical component. And in respect to our donor here, Home Depot in the Metro Atlanta area brought all of those that are doing critical home repair for veterans together, and they're funding all of them individually, but we're working together so we have 5 Habitat affiliates in Metro Atlanta that are participating, plus several other organizations like are represented here. What we did was a forcing function that we all consolidated the lists. So what we realized is how many people were on multiple lists, and how many veterans were shopping for the preferred product. But the reality is we're able to work through the list more efficiently and effectively because we come together as several organizations together addressing the issue. I know we did a project where we had a veteran that we couldn't serve because he didn't fall within our income guidelines. And the Habitat affiliate in that area didn't do the work. We partnered with with Purple Heart Homes to put a roof on a veteran's home. And that's, again, knowing the organization, knowing that I could reach out to the leadership over there at Purple Heart and say, here's the veteran, and then bring our partner to that conversation. Unfortunately, most Home Depot is been that repetitive word, and I know Wells Fargo's out there too, and things like that. But figuring out how to work together to serve our communities is an important component that is very difficult when we spend so much time just in our little stovepipe. You know.
What I find that I don't know, it sounds like you're the same way, but I find typically in the rural areas, at least in my footprint, is that when someone calls and says we need help with our home repairs, they may want, well, our floor needs fixing. Well, you know right then, you know the house is falling apart. So you go out, you do a site visit, and the house needs replacement. And so there's this moral dilemma about, do you fix the floor? Do you replace the roof? Do you replace the heat pump in a house that is structurally not there? So the home HUD are readily available, at least in our area, but home HUD requires that you have to bring the house up to code. Well, if I did every house up to code, I could fix 3 houses. How responsible is that? So again, you go through these dilemmas of, I've got, $500,000. Do I help 50 people or do I help 3? And so it's hard to operate in our world and meet the needs of the people, keep the paperwork flowing, keep the funders happy, keep the data people happy, and still keep moving forward.
And remembering all the time that this is their castle.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it's a challenge, and like on our reservations, a lot of our homes are, well, I had one that was built in the 1600s, and they called me up and said I had a water leak in the bathroom, and I went over there and the wall had melted and I could see outside, but you can't do anything because it's historical preservation. And so you're in these catches. So we have all these challenges, but I'm just going to kind of wrap it up here because we've run out of time here. So I want to thank everybody for their input, and let's continue this conversation. We don't have to stop now. We know each other, and let's continue this conversation on and offline, and see where we can improve our veterans housing. It is important, and give a hand to our panelists here. They will work.
We are about to go on a brief 15-minute intermission. Those folks that are joining us online, we're going to pause you guys, come back right at 3:15, and so we encourage you to come back on time so that we can finish on time. Thank you.
Anybody get hit with the stop sign in the last conversation? Oh, well, you weren't watching. I saw that. I wasn't watching. So, all right, watch out, Joyce. Terry is armed and ready.
Well, I'm a person of few words. So.
Yes. Very good. So I am absolutely thrilled to welcome a panel here that includes some folks who've been working in our field for a long time and are extraordinary experts. That Ontario run through the bio, but I want to take a minute to say that we're an extraordinarily lucky organization to have a couple of field offices and one of the management staff in our Atlanta office here today. I hope all of you know and know well. If you don't, you should. Shantaria Charleston, I think you raised your hand earlier, an Army vet. A mama of one in our Atlanta office, and has been running many of these training programs and most all of our veterans work. An extraordinary asset as a new person here at HAC. I'm thrilled to be colleagues with her and invite you to introduce the panel.
All right, thank you very much. So our panel today, or our final panel today, is a rental housing solutions panel, and we are joined by 3 panelists. We have Joyce Allen, who is the Deputy Administrator for Multifamily Housing over at USDA Rural Development. We also are joined by Karen Boyd, who has been the Administrative and Case Manager of the Veterans Place in Northfield, Vermont. And our last panelist is Catherine Monet. She's the Chief Executive Officer over at the National Coalition for Homeless Veterans. And so we are actually going to jump right off into our panel discussion today. And we're going to start out with Karen today. Not Karen, I'm sorry. Yeah, Karen. We're starting out with Karen. And so Karen, just want to find out from you or get from you a little bit about the Veterans Place, the activities and kind of the mission and the services that the Veterans Place.
Well, I've already told Joyce her little stop sign's not gonna work. She's gonna have to beat me over the head. So, because I can talk about the Veterans Place and go on and on and on. I started there in May of 2009. We took our first residents in September of 2009. We're a grant per diem program, which through the VA system, which means we got a grant and we're able to buy the building that we are in, which was the old Towns Hospital / nursing home / assisted living facility. We house 26 veterans there, and there's 2 full-time employees and 1 part-time case manager. Phil and I deal with everything from transportation to food ordering to filling out Social Security applications to you name it, we do it. And it's more than a full-time job, and I absolutely love it. I am the mom of 2 veterans. As a mom, I've been through 5 deployments with those 2 kids. Which is, I attribute to all my gray hair to. But that's why I do what I do, is because I am so thankful for their service and the fact that they came home relatively safe and sound. So I guess that's my intro.
Do you want to move into your video?
And then we'll just, yes, this will talk about the Veterans Place, what we do here. This is
How do veterans go from serving our country to out on the streets? Tonight, we head inside a home for homeless vets in Northfield to find out. In part 1 of our series, The Veterans Place.
I was in the Air Force 1963 through 1967. I was a crew chief on F-4 Phantom fighters. I was in the Navy, and I was in for almost 10 years, so I was all over the place.
What brought you here?
To this house? Homelessness and just a long series of bad choices. A guy by the name of Bernie Madoff ruined me. And I became disgusted with society and all that, so I checked out. The primary reason was I'm a recovering alcoholic. When I got out of rehab, I didn't feel like I was ready yet to face everything on my own yet. And this is a really great support atmosphere here for recovering alcoholics, addicts, that sort of thing. May 20th, I got off a Greyhound bus in Brattleboro. Didn't know anybody, knew nothing. In a matter of 3 days, I was hooked up with a drop-in center. I had a liaison person from the VA who got me all registered. And the next thing I know, she's telling me about various options, which blew me away. Options? I have options. And one of the options was Northfield.
So it's Karen Boyce, and I am the administrative manager of the Veterans Place.
For folks who aren't familiar with this place, what is the goal of the Veterans Place?
We're a 2-year transitional home for homeless veterans. So when the guys come here, the idea is that they've got a bed to sleep in, they got a roof over their head, they've got access to food 24/7. We have transportation to appointments at the VA or to job interviews or whatever.
What's a day like in here?
It's home. And like any home, you know, we get up, and some of us are up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning to go work. Some others of us, not so much, but we have breakfast together. We'll talk about the books that we're reading. We'll talk about the VA.
They're not the stereotyped, you know, veteran with the shopping cart that the media has made the guys out to be. We've had retired lieutenant colonels. We've had, you know, the young kids from the Iraq and Afghanistan war. Lots of Vietnam veterans.
We're a unique fellowship in that we're all veterans. Anybody that's watching this that has served in the military will understand what I'm talking about. There are far too many of us out there in the street, in the woods. There can't be enough Northfield. And I know that because my lifestyle has been out there on the street and in the woods. And I'm aware of far too many men and women who need an opportunity like this, who are falling between the cracks, they're getting lost.
With veterans, it's very easy, you know, once they get home, but once that uniform comes off and the issues start to build up, and the guys have, you know, a problem getting back into civilian life, and then lots of times, you know, families just don't know what to do anymore. So it, you know, the younger vets, anyways, that's when they, you know, they leave and they don't have any place to go.
I think the first thing I would want to tell them is that this is a house of humanity. It's a house of people who have a record of service and who, one of the cliches I would use, but I would say to the other person out on the street, there, but for the grace of God, go you.
Monday on the 30, we took you inside the Veterans Place in Northfield to show you how some of the men living there ended up homeless. Tonight, in part 2 of that special report, what they're doing to turn their lives around.
Well, we're really not that different from anybody else. If we fail, so be it. But don't make our failure that much easier by prejudging or by rejecting us.
How has your life changed since moving in?
Oh, I think my whole attitude about life has changed.
We've served over 230 veterans in the 7 years we've been open. We have a 78% success rate with transitioning our guys out into long-term housing.
I'm told about a quarter of the folks who come here end up coming back. How do you avoid being in that pool?
I think I'm just working the plan. And you'll hear that from a lot of the guys, if you speak with a few of them, is working our plan. We each have an individual plan. For my part, I know in my heart that I will never return to anything other than sobriety. I have grandchildren, I have children, I have friends. how the love and the happiness that I see on their faces when they see that I am sober and straight and back in their lives and in a positive way, that's enough reinforcement for me. I suspect in many cases with folks who have come back that they probably lack that kind of support out there. I would suspect that would be a real key element in a failure to make a really true transition into sobriety. I think for myself that that's not going to be a problem, but then neither does anybody else who does come back. Being here, they've given me an opportunity to get into the workforce, which I'm doing. I'm joining the Civil Air Patrol. Civil Air Patrol is going to provide me with means to obtain a pilot's license. I want to be an air ambulance pilot. I've recently started a course of study to become a medical billing and coding technician, which is moving along quite nicely. And I just feel like there's hope for the future again, which I hadn't for a long time. My life has done a 180. It's been an amazing and wonderful experience.
Are you ever afraid of failure?
Oh, I'm always afraid of failure. I think everybody is. But it's how you deal with that fear of failure that really kind of decides how you go from there. And I'm in the past have not dealt with that fear of failure all that well, which is part of the reason why I'm here now. It's hard not to feel some sense of guilt. I'm being given an opportunity, and I truly appreciate it. And in some ways, I feel like I've fallen into it. It's not like I went out looking for it. And I know there must be people like myself who are out looking for it and not finding it. A lot of my answer to things not going exactly the way I wanted them to was, I'll just have another drink. Then it doesn't matter so much. Now it's, that's not an option. And I'm actually dealing with things that I probably should have dealt with years ago. And doing it in a fashion that's healthy for a change. I'm going to leave Northfield, but I'm going to take with me not only the improvement in myself, but I'm going to take with me relationships that I've developed with my fellow housemates that are going to last a long time, if not forever.
Our thanks to Jim and Mike for sharing their stories with us. We, of course, wishing them all the best.
Well, Washington County in Vermont, which is the county that we're in, serves the largest homeless population in the whole state. So not just veterans, but homeless families in general. So the resources get spread out so that there's, and unfortunately, and we've started to break the it's not a stigma, but the idea or the concept, because people in our COC felt that, hey, their house, they're at the veterans place, they got a roof over their heads, they got 3 meals a day, so they are a lower priority than the guy that's living in his truck. So that we've started saying, no, they're here. This is a transitional housing opportunity, so we have to find housing beyond here. So yes, they're housed right now, but it's not forever. There's a 2-year limit on it, and the VA would prefer that it was only 6 months. That's the other thing I was going to say. There really should be a VA representative here in the room to be hearing this, and a lot of the comments, because they fund us, but that funding is always precarious. We found out last year, 2 days before Christmas, that we were going to have to reapply in order to stay open. The NOFA came out. At Veterans Place, we have 2 full-time staff people and 2 actual working board members. We did the application ourselves, and we were not going, we are the first program that opened up in the state. We're the largest one in the state. We're the only communal living program. We're the only one that serves meals to the guys. And we were going to get cut. The VA was going to cut with it. There's 62 beds in the state for the homeless veterans in the GPD programs, and they were going to cut 26 of those beds. And actually they were going to cut the Phoenix House beds too. So more than half of the beds. And there was no plan as to where the guys that were living with us were going to go. They were just going to not fund us. And thank God for Bernie Sanders, because we stayed in touch with him, and his office followed the process. And when he realized that we were going to be cut, he got on the phone with Secretary Shulkin immediately. And he advocated enough that all of the programs in the state that were going to be, in the country that were going to be cut, got a one-year extension and have to reapply again this year. So the NOFA came out in November. So we've actually hired a grant writer to help us this time around. So it's always, we never know whether that money's going to be there. So, and we have to spend so much time trying to get the money to stay open that it takes time away from the job that we should be doing, which is helping to get these guys housed. So that's an issue. And the VA is always changing the goalpost. So we're always, they don't consider a veteran that's sleeping on his cousin's couch or his brother's couch or whatever homeless. That veteran actually has to either sleep in his car, go to a shelter, or rent a hotel room with his own money in order to be considered homeless to come into the GPD program. So those are some of the things that are very frustrating for us. And as far as the housing piece of it, and how many homeless veterans do you know that have good credit rating? Just because of so that doesn't help with their applications. We basically have to sit with the guys, and lots of times we have to go to the housing authorities and advocate for these guys one-on-one with people to get them housed, or to get them on even on the wait lists. And the wait lists in Vermont for subsidized housing are anywhere from 2 years to 11 years long. So that's always an issue. Ideally, what we would like to do is, and we have guys that live with us that they don't live well by themselves. For some reason or another, and a lot of it is boredom, because they've gone from a program where no matter what time of the night you wake up, there's always somebody up that you can talk to, or not necessarily talk to, but is there if you need them. And you move into that apartment by yourself, and there's nobody to talk to. And so lots of times the guys fall right back into their bad habits again. And which means, then they're spending their money on their drugs or their alcohol, and they're not paying their rent, so they end up homeless again. Back when the HUD-VASH vouchers first came out, it used to be a reward system. So the veteran would, come to the VA and get their services and go into a rehab program. From the rehab program, go to a shelter. From the shelter, come into a grant per diem program. So there were all these steps, and they were given more tools to help remain, get a good solid footing underneath of them. So then, after they had been with us for 2 years, then they were given that HUD-VASH voucher, and they were more apt to be successful living on their own. And now our guys are at the bottom of the consideration pile for the HUD-VASH vouchers, because they figure that while they're with us, Phil and I are supposed to find that housing for them. So it's a last resort. If we can't find something in the 2-year period that they're with us, then they might possibly be able to get the HUD-VASH voucher. Or if we kick them out of the program because of a rule violation, or they just walk off the property and decide, I can't do this anymore, then they're given a HUD-VASH voucher.
Let me ask a follow-up question, because you talked a little bit about some of the critical elements. You've also gone and delved into some of the challenges that you guys face. So talk to us, or tell us a little bit more about how you deal with those challenges, looking at from concept to implementation, how the Veterans House came to be and where the Veterans Place is now. What did you do to kind of address some of those challenges?
Well, we're starting to do that now with this networking that's helping, because it's letting people know that we're there and what we're doing, and just the more awareness has helped. It's hooking up with service organizations and other veterans groups that have come in and been supportive. It takes a lot of imagination, trying to, because each one of the guys have different issues. So it's trying to come up with thinking outside of the box. So we're trying to get somebody who doesn't fit in the square peg housed. So it's looking at the home share program, or having the guys buddy up to rent a place, because then they can afford it together, and not move in by themselves and then have absolutely no money to their name if they share expenses. One of the drawbacks to that, though, is like Marvin was saying, though, with Vietnam veterans, they have a hard time staying put. So unfortunately, we've tried this twice, and one of the guys always ends up boogieing and leaving the one behind to hold the bag. So we try to make sure that it's going to work out when we do try to put guys together. It's just, there's one size doesn't fit all, so it takes a lot of imagination and
So then, realizing that one size doesn't fit all, what is the one piece of advice, or what's the one takeaway that you would impart to us for folks that might be interested in, undertaking an activity such as the Veterans Place is undertaking?
One piece of advice.
Or two or top three, I don't know.
I think that the advice is just having a lot of support, being connected with a lot of organizations that can be supportive and helpful.
That's some really good advice. One of the other things too that I would think would be really helpful is to kind of diversify that funding stream. I know we've become really reliant on single programs of funding, but I think it's really important that we look at imaginative ways to diversify that funding stream. And so, speaking of funding, I'm going to transition the panel discussion over to Joyce and kind of ask Joyce to kind of tell us a little bit about the services, well, actually about USDA's funding priorities and the different programs that, while not specific to veteran funding, but that might be useful in a rural setting to kind of help with funding development for veteran activities.
Well, thank you for that question. I think one of the things that we do is we like to partner and to leverage our funding. I know that you had a program earlier. You heard about our direct housing, single-family housing programs, the 502 direct that can, go to very low income and go all the way up to 80% and be guaranteed with 100% financing. We also have a rental housing program that was part of the Housing Act in 1949 and available for farmers, and then in the 60s became available, to the public for loans in rural areas. And I'm thinking, I was hearing Karen speak about, the veterans place is 2 years, and then what's the next step? And I think an opportunity might be is maybe our rental programs could be the next step. I can go a little bit to that program and tell you a little bit of how it works, but it works for families in rural communities. I put together a little bit of a slide deck for you, and we serve people with incomes less than 50% of area median income, and of course people can buddy up, like you said, and still be under that income limit. And we can go all the way up to, with our housing programs, 115% of area median. So how we support is see, I'm just kind of flipping through, is that we have a rental assistance component to our housing. So we believe that, or we have the applicants don't pay more than 30% of their income towards their rent. And if they need a subsidy, then there's a subsidy that's given to the project owner to offset the difference, and that's called rental assistance. So they can afford to stay into those programs. The rental assistance goes with the property, and in some cases, the property may, decide to prepay, and then the tenants living in that property would receive a voucher that would go with them to another property. But we have no formal set aside for veterans. However, we do serve the very low. So we do have thousands of veterans across rural America living in our properties. And one way to find out is USDA just redid their website, and they spent a lot of time, and I think they finally got it right. They got an address that's pretty easy to remember. It's www.rd.usda.gov. And when you get to that page and there's a picture of it, right on the bottom left-hand corner, there's a little thing. It says Find Rural Rentals. And this is pretty amazing, but if you click on where it says Find Rural Rentals, you'll get a map. And, I was playing around actually with New Mexico, and last night I was testing it out. So I clicked on Cibola, And I said, what do we have in Cibola? And there were 3 properties. And then they had the management companies, the agents, where you would call and find out about vacancies and waiting lists and how to get people, you know, in on the list and to get them shelter. So maybe that's something that we can work and partner with in that respect.
Well, thinking about partnering with USDA, there's an initiative that you guys do. It's Project Challenge. So talk to us about a little bit maybe about Project Challenge or other ways in which USDA might assist or partner with local veteran service providers to increase awareness of USDA multifamily funding opportunities.
Well, Project Challenge isn't a USDA program, but it's something I understand that's offered by the VA that we can partner with. And again, it's the combining of different resources. And I searched the website in 2015 on our RD website in Harrisburg, PA. There was an article where the USDA Harrisburg office teamed up with the Project Challenge on the 502 direct single family side. And they found a way to, you know, just provide opportunities for veterans to find shelter. You know, but again, it could be a multifamily property. We have farm labor properties that when people are homeless and there's vacancies available, that statute will allow us to house those vacant people. And I didn't mention here with me, I brought CB Alonso, who's our director over on the preservation side. Did I miss anything that I should have shared, CB?
Absolutely not.
I didn't even pay him to say that.
How much did she pay you?
I do his rating.
That's payment enough.
Right.
And so, as I mentioned earlier, Joyce is actually the deputy administrator for multifamily housing, but she comes to us from a single family side. And I know we talked a little bit earlier about single family programs and such for USDA. Are there any questions that we might want to ask Joyce since we have the expert in the room while she's here?
I mean, one of the things that we tried to do with our program was to consolidate any outstanding debt when they took on that home loan. But USDA, the rural development, we had a really helpful partner, but they couldn't consolidate any other debt unless it was a housing debt. And it just makes them much more successful if they can bring on that whole loan in together as one payment. And I don't know if that's something USDA would be willing to look at or not.
That is actually a statutory requirement where that says that, you know, if it was a 502 loan, if it was one of our loans, we could recapitalize it and recast it, but we can't do the outside debt. I've seen examples though where a lender would, like say with student loan, he would recapitalize and consolidate and make it one small monthly payment for the applicant. And then because the lender did that, he could then go forward with a mortgage on the guaranteed side, or he could just make that payment low for them. And then we could make a direct loan because they'd have one small monthly payment. So again, another opportunity to partner. I think I heard Marvin say with Native Community Finance, you have people with lots of different debt and you'll recast it all into one low monthly payment. And then that lowers or increases their repayment ability. So then we could come in and make that housing loan.
My question is about income, sort of, but I don't know if this is a local issue, national issue, I don't know. But, we understand that when they have a housing voucher, because someone mentioned we do in our world a lot, take these housing choice vouchers and apply them towards the house payment. We're having trouble with USDA interpreting that housing voucher as income. And we on the housing side do not look at it as income, that it would be towards the house payment.
Right.
That if you calculate it as income, it's very lopsided as to how their affordability. I mean, it can throw it off $20,000 or $30,000 And I've had these conversations before at a national level, which it seems to be that nationally, I don't know, they're not counting it as income, but when you get down to the local level and you turn in that what's it called, the worksheet that you have to fill out, whatever it is, that worksheet, the worksheet itself, that worksheet itself calculates it as income. And so therefore your agents are calculating as income because that's the way the worksheet does it. And so, but it's not fair.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up. I really do. CV, do you have any thoughts?
Have you had this conversation before with anyone?
This is the first I've heard of it. I'm taking a note so we can go back and.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, that basically we're counting voucher as income for tenants.
Yeah. Where
So like if I had
counted
$150
as
towards
rental
house payment.
assistance can be like counted, in terms
right.
of there's other subsidies that are available, as long as it's not, you're not
should be a
making
subsidy,
it more than, what the subsidy would have been by itself, that's fine. So if you could leave us with your card, we'd like to continue that conversation. So these are things that, because you let us know that something is happening, sometimes, our job in DC is to make sure the field has the right direction, and it's easy for sometimes things to just be misinterpreted. So we try to figure out a way to straighten that out.
I do want to ask kind of follow-up. So is that issue, because we kind of run into that with Habitat where there are people that are valuing income. And if you're looking at that very low income veteran who's using that voucher and trying to qualify, in that case, you would want to count it as income to get them across that threshold. Whereas if you don't, if that's their only source, they don't qualify.
But
the beauty of it is if it's like, let's say, I don't know, you have a $500 housing voucher. You could have a $550 house payment. And if that $500 voucher is going to pay $500 towards that house payment, your client only has to pay the $50.
So he has to qualify for $50 is what you're saying.
So it should be made, like if they only have $2,000 income, whatever it is, they're paying 30% of their, just to get the housing voucher, they have to pay 30% of their income. That's the way the housing voucher system is set up. So the housing voucher system is set up to make it fair and equitable, but then when it gets to a mortgage application, it throws it out and calls it, it's like you made $500 income. And then it
should reduce the amount of what the payment is that they need to qualify is what should happen. Yeah, because they're not qualifying for a $550 payment, they're qualifying for a $50 payment. But the only problem is if it's a mortgage, there has to be a certainty that I think that $500 will continue for the 30 years, or otherwise the lender is in trouble. So we'd love to dive deeper in that with you.
Well, my thought on this, and I may be out to lunch, but not everybody should be a homeowner.
Right.
And if you're getting down to where you're trying to figure out how they can afford a house payment, they can't afford the upkeep on the house.
Right.
So they shouldn't be a homeowner, they should be a renter. So I'm always looking at that is like, should you be a homeowner or should you be a renter? Because we have that, especially with the 37 Act housing, where they made natives homeowners and they couldn't afford changing hot water. And so the houses fell down around their feet. And so I'm always looking at that also. So I was just throwing that out.
I agree. I think every distressed foreclosure that we see in the single family side is because things were stretched too thin. And so then something happens or somebody gets sick or the car breaks down. There's no reserves. And that person really shouldn't have been a homeowner.
Right.
And that assumes affordable rental though, which is kind of one of the issues here. There's a lot of our in Huntington. Part of the answer why we pushed them to home ownership is because the VASH voucher and the rental property available was more expensive than the stick-built home.
Yeah.
So these communities that don't have affordable rental is an issue. The grant per diem programs where they come out of it, and if there's not affordable rental options.
Well, and most of them that we work with, they're very successful renters. They have jobs. their housing assistance might be $200. And to answer your question, you do have to factor in maintenance and all that.
Right.
Utilities is all, it's a
that's
prepaid
under
worksheet, right?
Yeah, that worksheet,
And
yeah.
so yeah, it's all factored in, but for those homeowners that you are trying to shift that way, the RD considers it income. That's all I can say.
But not on the rental side.
No.
Okay, they don't look at, like, if they were qualifying to say be in a 515 multifamily property, they wouldn't look at it as income, would they?
No.
Just on the
It's just
homeownership side.
And I think it's the worksheet that, because you have to plug it in,
Yeah.
and then it just,
That's
the
interesting.
system takes it. Right. The system takes
I see, I understand the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one other thing I wanted to throw at Karen, she's always talking about homelessness. On the res, we talk about houselessness.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can ever get anybody to change that around, because we don't allow our people to sleep outside, everybody's taken in, whether it's, a cousin or whatever else, we always bring them in. So, when we look at supportive housing, we look at houselessness, not homelessness, because they may be staying at, their cousin's house over here one night and my house the next night and this type of thing. So I don't like the word homelessness. I like houselessness.
Well, thinking of the terminology of houselessness and homelessness, we are joined by Catherine Monet from the National Coalition for Homeless Veterans. And so I'd like for Catherine to take a really quick moment to kind of tell us about what you guys do over there at NCHV. And then a second part of it would be to kind of, after hearing the practitioner and both the funder perspective, talk to us about the gaps in services that you guys are seeing as a national TA intermediary.
Okay. So NCHV is a really great organization. I've been there since March. I'm sorry, it's National Coalition for Homeless Veterans, but we do also work with houseless veterans, and I think we are really interested in what's happening in tribal areas, particularly with tribal HUD VASH, just to address your concern, where I think folks are really looking at an at-risk population versus, a chronically homeless one. But we've been around since 1990. We really do three major things in our office. One of the first things we do is we provide technical assistance for the Department of Labor's Homeless Veterans Reintegration Grant. So it's really an employment program focused specifically on homeless veterans. It's a tiny program, but it's one that really provides some great work, some great, I think, benefits for its enrollees with regard to being able to afford housing. We also have a policy and advocacy arm that works really closely with our friends on Capitol Hill and our other stakeholders. I see some of you in the room here, but they do a lot of work with our friends on the Hill and in the administration to make some of the VA programs really work well for veterans and the folks here like Karen who are serving them. And the other thing we do is communication, so just general awareness and member-facing communications. In terms of what I've heard here and some of the big challenges, I feel like the big elephant in the room is really, the development of affordable housing, one, but two, also preserving affordability and preserving, the structure, right? So making sure that housing can be maintained. I think there are a couple of other challenges, so I'm not going to give you only one. I'm going to just lay it all out on the table because that's kind of how I roll. I feel like we see increasingly that veterans in rural areas are older and higher rates of disabilities, especially in the homeless population. So I think that we need to think a lot more about some of the aging in place work that people are doing and, addressing some of the poverty related causes of homelessness. And I think this is something that you probably talked about at length before I got here, right? So things like weatherization, looking at your housing conditions and making sure that people can really stay somewhere and it's not the actual structure that causes them to become houseless or homeless. And then I think other broad rural challenges exist, like, employment in the jobs market, transportation, and other things that I think everybody kind of deals with, whether they're, houseless or homeless or housed.
All right. So thinking about that, because you work primarily with homeless or houseless veterans, I'm trying to get that right. Do do you have any numbers for successful transitions for those houseless veterans moving into either rental or home ownership? We have our data guys here, but I figure this is your area of expertise, and so you guys can maybe.
I'll be honest, and I'll tell you, they might have better data than I do. I mean, I feel like VA looks nationally at the number of folks that touch their programs and move into housing, but there isn't necessarily that same level of granularity about, rural, urban, suburban, all of that. I mean, I can tell you that when you're looking at homelessness, the best year-over-year estimates that a lot of folks use in the field are the annual point in time count. And in 2016, it looked like there were about 5,300 homeless veterans in rural areas. That said, I mean, I think it's a lot harder to count folks in rural areas. I mean, the geography is vast. It's a lot harder to find volunteers. And I mean, you also have a lot more doubling up in people who are houseless that wouldn't necessarily be counted anyway, right? If you're only counting in shelters and you're, walking the streets and trying to see who's out there. But if you look at the number that they were able to find in the annual point in time count, that's about 1 in 8 homeless veterans in rural areas. So, I mean, that's a pretty big number.
Yeah.
That's probably low.
Yeah, I think it is. I agree.
Keith, did you want
Oh,
to?
I just reiterate, it's very difficult, a lot of times you use the point in time count, and it's really difficult in rural areas, because I grew up in a rural area, and people would normally would stay on people's sofas, their basement, their couch. It's not literal home or houselessness, it's near, and it's very difficult to get a count. And I was at a conference recently where they talked about Nebraska and had to be a really bad snowstorm when they were going to do their count. So the numbers got all screwed up. And so then they rescheduled it for another day, and they had another snowstorm. And they were talking about the vast distances that they had to travel was 7, 8, 9, 10 miles. There was no internet on some of this to get a count. And I understand it's difficult with the BASH vouchers and all this because you need a count and stuff. So then what are you going to do if you can't get a count? But your numbers sound about right. And I use the point in time data too. And when people ask us, I always say, but probably the best way is if you can do a count yourself. We have people tell us in a small town, and we'll say if you could possibly try to contact the local authorities to do your own count, because that's probably for rural areas the best way to get a true count. And we had I don't know if it's still on our website, we had a toolkit for reservations to Native American reservations to actually do counts. And I thought that was a really valuable toolkit. It was trying to so somebody could create a plan themselves to actually do a count, because that's probably the best way to do it.
And that's how I came up with that.
Yeah.
Zoe.
It's a great tool. And I think it's very difficult because, and I grew up, I had a friend and his uncle lived in their basement, but he was houseless, but he wasn't homeless. He lived there. So he was actually a veteran too.
So thinking of the different toolkits and the different agencies that are providing the data, because NCHB acts as a liaison, what agencies or who would you identify as uncommon partners or folks that practitioners such as Karen might turn to get involved in rural veteran housing and the supportive services?
So I'm going to back that up a little bit, and I'll tell you, in rural areas, you really see 2 models of success, right? One where you're intensively partnering with every single person and can find in your community who's willing to give you an ear and help you out. And the other is where you are the sole provider and you build up your services. So you're adding on employment services, you're adding on this, you're adding on that, and you're just sort of building your capacity into the one-stop shop for veterans. That said, I think it's kind of a fine line to toe as a provider to figure out what is best and where you should partner and where you should provide services in-house. And it is sort of a organizational planning decision that you have to make. But I think some really great partnerships that I've seen are, with the justice system, working with your local jails and your local police force, working even sometimes with your local parks, right? And sometimes your national parks in certain communities see a lot of folks who are out there unsheltered, and not because they're camping for fun, but because they don't have anywhere else to go. Working with your community health centers, your tribal governments. We see a lot of really great success too with folks who are working with their local government. And I think we've seen that a lot with the Mayor's Challenge to End Veteran Homelessness, where a lot of mayors have really gotten engaged and have brought more resources and more partners to the table, because there is something about having that power of a convener, right? So somebody to bring your local chamber of commerce and your folks who have the jobs and probably have rental apartments and places that can really support the veterans that you're serving. So I think you just need to sort of look around and make friends with everybody is probably the advice that I give, as basic as that sounds.
Well, I think you answered my last question because I was going to talk about where the natural connections might exist. And so you talked about the parks and the jails and those things. But maybe this is a question for anybody in the room. Are there any other natural connections where folks might look to join that might increase their capacities or strengthen their internal operations in such a way that they are able to better deliver services and housing for homeless or houseless veterans?
Well, I mean, I would certainly recommend Community Actions. There's 1,000 of them across the nation. They're a good network of, I mean, I feel, you know, they all come with their own different programs, but they kind of have the similar programs. And certainly, you know, we can help them with fuel if they do get a place to live, even in rental situation or otherwise. But I think it's a good resource anyway. Your local community action.
I've been wondering, wasn't that the role of the Continuum Cares to begin with? You know, wasn't that the reason why the continuums were put together, is to pull all the resources together so that we would all be in the same room? But I'm just not finding, it's weird that it is, but it's not. It's not pulling those resources together like I think it was intended to pull together.
So continuums of care are great, but I'll tell you they're sort of mixed, right? Like COC governance can be really great in some communities and they can be totally effective, and in others it's not necessarily that's the case. And I mean, I also think that veteran resources largely, you know, when COC started, weren't necessarily at the table in the way that they could or should have been. So now that we're starting to work a lot closely together and the COCs are starting to really pick up speed on like coordinated entry and some of the other things, there are a lot of folks, particularly in the veteran space, that are really struggling to catch up and to now build those relationships after the system has sort of been built and structured and prioritized. So it's been, I think, an interesting ride for a lot of veteran service providers.
I run a COC, right? So we get this argument all the time on who is homeless, who qualifies for it. And it comes back to that. A lot of it is triage, right? Like there's not enough money for everybody, so who goes first? And that's the most painful, hardest decision out there, because you get, yes, somebody served, but should they go before a 17-year-old with a 6-month-old baby? What the COCs can do is say, in our community, here's how we prioritize and try to make sure everybody's at the table. I will also flip it that at this point in most communities, not all, homeless veterans have just way more resources than anybody else. And that's part of an understanding on both sides. And how do you balance out if someone is a veteran but doesn't qualify for some things? How do you then make sure there's that smooth transition so they do get what they are qualified for in the pool with everybody else? So that isn't a good answer, but there is no easy button on that one.
Are there any questions for our panelists today?
I have a quick
question for Catherine. You did mention the coordinated entry system. Has this been implemented across the board at all COCs? I think it was mandated for that to be done. I was just wondering if that has been.
So it's been mandated, and I don't know, maybe Mary might be better than I can. I'll tell you that I've heard that various COCs are in different stages. And I mean, I've been to a couple of COC meetings in the last month, just in like the counties around here.
January is the new standard. It's January 4th to redo our prioritization. So if you're interested in prioritization in your COC, they're rewriting it now.
Yeah. So people are sort of redeveloping. I wouldn't say that everybody's got it down, but I would say that a lot of communities are firming it up and have a pretty good sense, I think, of what they'd like to do.
Thank you.
One thing though, I agree with Marvin, like homeless. See, we got no homeless on the reservation. we got houseless, saying this. So when it first came out, we didn't really qualify for this on the reservation. A lot of people say, we didn't even qualify to apply for this homeless thing because we don't have any on the reservation. We don't have nobody living in the streets. And therefore, it's really it's a very challenge, and just couldn't. We didn't qualify for those grants, things like that under the VA. I think they changed it though now to critical or at risk or something like that.
Well, can I ask you follow-up questions? I'm sorry, now I'm all engaged, but so I guess what have you applied for or not applied for? Because I'm really curious, like what's going on, like where you're from and
we're from
dealing with issues.
From Arizona, and I think we had applied for that like homeless program before for under housing, but we didn't qualify for it.
Okay.
We applied for the VASH also.
Yes,
Yes, we did.
Did you get it?
We weren't invited. No, we
Oh.
weren't. But our boss and
Okay.
director, they were very adamant about it, so we did submit our application.
Good.
I think
This
San
is-
Carlos and T.O.
St. Carlos and
Yeah.
they applied. They got it, but we didn't. So we upset, but we still gonna apply again till we get it. That we gonna keep the opportunity. And there's some of this like the wording, we just not really kind of qualifying for those programs. Some of this stuff, I'm just kind of very disappointed sometimes.
I hear you. I feel like it's a challenge. And I mean, I'll be honest, I grew up in Hawaii, right? And it's the same way with like Native Hawaiian, like that kind of housing too, right? Where they've got sort of that housing set aside and it is very much oversubscribed. There aren't enough houses for people and they do the same thing. Like nobody's really, I mean, there are homeless people, but by and large, it's people who are houseless and you're staying with your families. You're doing all kinds of different things. And sometimes it does feel like maybe the definition is a little bit narrow to meet some of those needs. That said, I think in urban areas, it kind of works. So I mean, maybe there's more discussion that can be had at the federal level on, how we massage things and eligibility requirements for rural or tribal areas to make programs really work for people out there.
To me, part of the question or the challenge is, and every single one of these is tied together. It's the critical home repair program that we get to early enough before the home is no longer fixable, and getting those folks to apply through the programs that are available when we could engage at a $10,000 point maybe and bring the home up to a habitable standard, but we're not getting it until it's way beyond. And then you have somebody who is never going to show up in a homeless thing because they actually own a home, but they're living in a trailer next to it and on their piece of property. So by every standard, they're homeless. They don't have access to water, they don't have access to regular, all those sorts of things. And then tying these programs together where, okay, somebody does end up in a grant per diem program. Well, how do we have a path for them out to a sustainable permanent housing solution, which grant per diem isn't, and some of these other, they're just places in time, and we forget that there is a path that we need to move to veterans. We need to continually have them going up, and if they do slip down, they need to be able to come back in the system and be able to be worked up. But as we just keep applying solutions in points in time, like homelessness and the focus on grant per diem program, which is nothing wrong with it, but it's tying them all together, ensuring that the grant per diem program is tied to an affordable rental, that there is affordable rental in the community, or if there's not affordable rental, that there are some solutions. And I think that's the problem, is where you are in that point in time. We really just focus on that point in time.
Well, if there was a way that we could, because some of the guys that, they've been through our program 4 times. They just can't live by themselves. If we could bring them back and still get the funding and house them and have the supportive services for them there at our property. But
so here's an interesting solution that came up from our habitat in Napa Valley. So kind of an expensive area from a grant per diem program. And they ran into that same issue. People were just recycling because there is no affordable rental in Napa. But what they ended up doing was and this is an odd one-off situation, but that nonprofit, so you guys had another piece of property. Well, Habitat built a home on it that was mortgaged, that was paid through the benefits, and I don't know the exact, but it was handled that way. But it became a permanent housing solution for people that came out of the grant per diem program that were sustainable. So they only had to rent a room in a 6-bedroom home that there's no way, the organization could have built it. But in partnering together, we came up with a solution so that some of those veterans coming up and out had a permanent place to land that didn't end at 24 months. And I think those are the kind of things that we need to be working on and developing together, because in that community, they thought beyond how do we just keep these guys in a program, or how do we expand the benefit.
And I have to piggyback on his comment, I'm sorry. Given Friday is the continuing resolution expires, now is a really important time to weigh in on federal spending. Because what I'm hearing in all these conversations is there's just not enough affordable housing. Rural communities, there's usually not enough rental, if there's any. And then there's substandard quality issues, and finding money for repair is like looking for a quarter, you know, on the floor. Like, it's impossible. And right now there's no agreement to lift the budget caps and put more funding in these really important programs. So you have great stories of people who need these programs. And your congressmen and your senators need to hear them, because they're not all Bernie Sanders who get it.
And Republican congressmen, especially.
Well, especially because what I've also heard is even if it saves federal resources. If people can stay in their homes while they age, it's a better use of the resources that we have that are scarce. So if we can get that message out, because that's also what I'm hearing, that resonates. The economics make sense. Let's keep these people in the homes that they own. But let's make sure that they're safe and quality, and then we'll save money on Medicare and other things. And making that argument as well, as kind of the pay for is not exactly there, but we can get there. But I think now is the time to weigh in over the next couple weeks. At least for the next year or two.
So for the next couple of weeks, for the next 2 years, we're
Yeah,
really
they're
hard.
already thinking about, you know, FY19, but they should have already been.
So I'm going to plug National Alliance's website on the affordable housing issue, because you want to click on that. It will give you the talking points, exactly what the HUD speak, federal speak on that, and it's really easy. I think you even have a click where if you don't know who your congressperson is, they will give you the link to find them.
I would also like to point out, Stephen over here, if you don't have a contact, he can help you.
And it's a tick mark. They want yeses or nos. That's all they really want. I mean, it sounds silly, but if you've ever sat in your congressperson's office, that's all they're tracking. Ups and downs.
I had that job once, you're right.
Yeah.
You have to start somewhere, right?
So do we have any additional questions for either of our panels today? We have one more item that's up on our agenda. Before we move to that, I'd like to offer up the floor for anyone who has any final questions or remarks or even comments.
Can I just ask one of the reservations? And this is, if you don't have any literally homeless people, are you allowed to apply as a high performing community through HUD? They didn't let you do that either? So I was trying to think, okay, never mind. Because I've never been with that.
We're in a world of our own, let's put it that way.
It makes sense. I mean, that's where everyone wants to get to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I will throw this in, and this is a pat on Joyce, is that if you take things to USDA and inform them, things get done.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I want to compliment Joyce because she's got something done for me that I was like, huh? and I just called her, and we got on the conference call, and the resolution's already back in New Mexico. So it's awesome. So talk to, you know, our government people, and I'm not sure if VA did any good, but I was up there yesterday in the VA offices. So, you know, as long as we're there and we're talking and we keep bringing it up, hopefully things will change a little bit.
All right. So we do have a special guest with us this afternoon who's going to provide final comments, and I'm actually going to throw to Rita to introduce.
Hi. Well, I was hoping that my Congressman Bill Rowe was going to be here, but he sent his next best person. Alex Large is his staff. Congressman Rowe is a Republican. but he, to kind of play off of this conversation that we've had in the last, say, 5 or 10 minutes, a lot of you in this room know Jim King at Fahy, and about 15 years ago, Fahy started telling us we have to tell our story. We have to tell our story. We have to tell our story. So I took that to heart, and I started telling Congressman Rowe my story. Not 15 years ago, but when he took office, I invited him to groundbreakings. I invited him to ribbon cuttings. I invited him to rental housing openings, homeownership groundbreakings. He came, he listened, and he observed, and he will tell any of you now how efficient my organization is, because I have educated him on what tax dollars we are using, what we do them for, and what beneficiaries are out there. He has seen them. And so one of my best memories, I couldn't have even planned it any better, but we had just completed our first 532 or 528 or whatever it is, the self-help mutual housing. Oh, yes. Sorry, I get all the self-help housing. We had just finished our first round of self-help housing and had a family featured at this ribbon cutting. Congressman Rowe was there. The guy was a veteran, so I was kind of like tying the two of them together. So Congressman Rowe was very excited about the veteran. But then come to find out his wife, Dr. Rowe, my congressman is an MD doctor, Dr. Rowe had delivered that wife. So talk about a connection. He remembered her, that he had delivered her, and now he's watching her move into a new home that she built with these USDA dollars. And so it was just one of those memories that I will never forget. But Congressman Rowe has been very supportive of veterans, VASH vouchers, our continuum of care, requested more vouchers, and by golly, he got them, so I will turn it over to Alex.
Thank you, Rita. So my name is Alex Large. I work on the subcommittee on health for the House Committee on Veterans Affairs. It might seem a little strange that the health subcommittee has the HUD VASH program and homeless veterans under their purview. But we like to think that there's oftentimes, more often than not, a connection between the services, the medical services they provide at VA, and the result of our veterans being on homeless or houseless and stuff. Yes, Dr. Rowe he really wishes he could have been here. I've got some short prepared remarks. I know you guys have been here all day, so I don't want to keep you too long. Dr. Rowe was an OBGYN by trade. He likes to joke that it helps to run for office when you've delivered half of your constituents. It really works out well sometimes, I guess. But on behalf of Chairman Rowe, thank you for the invitation for him to speak. He really wishes he could have been here. He sincerely regrets the absence, and I'll tell you why. As Rita may have told you, nestled into the Great Smoky Mountains, the very nature of Tennessee's 1st Congressional District lends itself to any discussion on rural communities, let alone veterans. With 10%, nearly 10% of our population being veterans, it almost comes with the territory, if you will. And naturally, as a veteran himself, and chairman of the committee, this is certainly a topic that he would love to be speaking on. However, the schedule just did not permit it this year. So a little background on the chairman, Dr. David Phil Rowe. He attended the University of Tennessee Medical School in Memphis and was drafted into the Army Medical Corps. He served as a medical officer in the DMZ near North Korea, or near North Korea during the Vietnam War, and was honorably discharged as a captain following the conflict. And he served 35 years as practicing medicine before coming to Washington. And even before coming to Washington, he served as the mayor of Johnson City, where Eastern Aid is based out of. So that's where he became acquainted with Ms. Patton here, and the wonderful work that Eastern Aid does. I can't speak highly enough about it. He speaks highly about it all the time. You should know that. So I can speak a little bit from the 30-foot level about how the committee's takes on homeless veterans programs. I don't know all the intricacies of the VA's work, but I can do my best to answer any questions. But during this, as I mentioned earlier, we kind of work from a healthcare mindset when we're looking at homelessness. And over this year, just since January, Dr. Rowe took the gavel in January. We've passed nearly 50 pieces of legislation out of the House of Representatives, not signed by law, but by the vast majority, the most pieces of legislation signed by the president have come out of our committee, and that really serves as a testament to how bipartisan the Veterans Committee is on the Hill. So we'd like to check politics at the door. We rarely ever have heated debate. It's everybody wants to do the right thing by the veterans. So some of the items we've addressed include emergency mental health services for those veterans who are discharged with other than honorable discharges. Typically, an other than honorable discharge is something that somebody will get for talking back or getting in a fight, or really more of an acting out sort of thing, something that's often associated with PTSD or something, or a mental illness of that nature. So we believe that bringing mental health services back to those veterans is the least that we can do. These people signed up to fight for the country. It's not their fault that they were inflicted with wounds, or visible or invisible. So we believe that it's VA's duty to take care of those. It's an expensive thing that we have to do, but again, we found the offset. It's something that everybody on the committee really wants to do. We've had a couple other pieces of landmark legislation. One increases economic opportunities for veterans. It's the Harry W. Comery Veterans Educational Assistance Act of 2017. It's a mouthful, but colloquially that's been called the Forever GI Bill. And as the name implies, it does not expire after 15 years after you've separated. This new version of the GI Bill will never expire for future service members or their dependents, to which they can transfer the benefit. I've been with Dr. Rowe for nearly 7 years. I know he's always held up the HUD-VASH program as probably the most successful program that VA administers. One of the key features of the program in his eyes is the wraparounds and supportive services that VA case managers provide to the veterans under the program. And as Chairman Rose says, it's one thing to put a roof over a homeless veteran's head. It's another to dig into the root cause of homelessness and support someone who's facing a comprehensive struggle. And as we've seen in East Tennessee, how communities can come together to lift our homeless and struggling veterans, as Aretha can likely attest. East Tennesseans are a proud people. Is that right? It often takes true desperation for them to ask for assistance, for helping hands. But there's no one more deserving. And if Dr. Rowe had one message for me to convey, it's that there's no one more deserving than someone who's willingly put their life on the line for our freedoms than to work for their benefit. We've also seen massive mobilizations of volunteer labor from organizations like Habitat for Humanity and the Appalachian Service Project, which have constructed and renovated houses for dozens of veterans in our district. Throughout the remainder of Dr. Rowe's chairmanship, he's got 6 more years, essentially. Dr. Rowe will continue to provide strong oversight for homeless veterans programs administered by the VA, and he'll do his best to highlight innovative approaches coming out of community organizations like Eastern Aid with Rita, and which serve our most vulnerable veterans. I'd like to thank Dr. Rowe would like to thank the Housing Assistance Council and Home Depot Foundation for inviting him to speak, and he regrets that he cannot make it. It'll be a pleasure for him to come in the future, and I will do my best to answer any questions you may have.
Alice has questions. Sorry, I'm that kid that always has questions. So it's nice to meet you, Alex. I'm Catherine Monet with the National Coalition for Homeless Veterans. And I'm so happy that you're here and that Chairman Rowe supports HUD-VASH and all the really great things that it's doing for Retha and the veterans down in Eastern. I'm sure you've heard about VA reallocating the way that it gives money to medical centers, right? The shift from special purpose to general purpose. And I'm sure then that you're aware of the potential impact on the quality of case management and the frequency of case management for veterans across the country and how uneven that could become. I'm wondering, I mean, given your awareness of that issue, like where Chairman Rowe falls, if you're
we are very
actively conducting oversight on.
We certainly will be. I can guarantee that. It's a discussion that's really recently evolving. We just had our first call on it yesterday.
Okay.
Really. I think we're going to have another call on it tomorrow.
Oh,
So it's definitely something that we're looking at. It's been held. Dr. Rowe himself will be on the call tomorrow, so it's going to be at the top level. It's definitely something that we're going to be keeping at the top of the agenda, providing direct oversight. I don't have much information to provide for you for what's come out of the calls yet, but I can assure you that we're going to be keeping an eye on it.
Hi, I'm Mary Gable. I'm with the National Alliance to End Homelessness. I just want to second what Catherine was saying too. We are very concerned because the HUD-VASH without case management, especially for the most vulnerable people, the most vulnerable veterans, is basically making the voucher useless, as you know.
Yeah, I purposefully wrote that into our remarks that the case management is really the critical function of HUD-VASH for us.
Okay. Great, thank you.
There's something local that's been very controversial, and I'm speaking totally out of ignorance and giving you the opportunity to share whatever it is. He's apparently getting some heat about people thinking that they can't get their opioids anymore. Mm. So can you explain that?
So VA has implemented the opioid safety initiative. It's a program that's been loosely based off of a set of guidelines promulgated by the CDC. And there's one veteran in the district particularly who's been extremely vocal about it. We've talked with case managers, patient advocates, everybody at the VA, everyone up to the secretary about this. And Dr. Rowe believes that there is absolutely an opioid epidemic.
It sure is.
It's very apparent in our district, as you know. And veterans are, the way that the opioid safety initiative is being administered is through a very specific tapering process. It's designed specific for each specific veteran. It is really designed to gear veterans who are on chronic pain management from opioids. And it's as more and more science comes out, it shows that opioids are not an effective way to treat chronic pain. And so he is supportive of the initiative, but it is something that has to be extremely one-off for each veteran. You cannot, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Our friendly veteran who is upset. He believes that the goal is 90% of opioids gone by 2019 or whatever it might be, which is simply not the case. It just should be administered on a case-by-case basis. It should be a conversation that happens between the physician and the primary care physician and a pain management specialist and the veteran himself. So it absolutely does need to be, we do need to provide significant oversight of how they're doing that. And Dr. Rowe is committed to doing that. But as a physician, he certainly understands the science behind it. He's always avoided opiates if at all possible, knowing that it is a very addictive way to treat people. So continued oversight. He does generally support the initiative, but it is dangerous area for certain veterans.
I don't know if y'all had it in your all's area, but anyway, it's just been very local news. But I've
I know that it's a huge epidemic everywhere, and everybody else is trying to get everybody off of it. And so I just kind of felt like it was something that should have been the correct thing to do, but for some reason it's being turned into a negative. And so I just kind of.
It is the correct thing to do. And a lot of veterans who have been on opiate prescriptions for a long time, they really enjoy their opiates. I mean, it's pretty easy to say, but there's, it's oftentimes the VA's fault getting these guys free legal opiates.
Most definitely.
Yeah. So
Yeah, we've had several guys through our program that came into the program addicted to the opiates through the VA. With time, we have gotten them into treatment so that they could detox and tried to explain to them, you're mistaking the desire and the need for the opiate, thinking that you need it for the pain, and it's not the pain that you need it for. You're dependent on it, and it's that fix you need. So
it's a hard conversation.
Yes, it is, and we've managed to get the guys through it and on the other side of it, and then and like I said, gotten them off and housed.
I think Mark has a question at the back.
Yeah, I'm Mark Walker with American Legion. Just want to thank Chairman Rhodes' leadership as far as BL, the field modelization, and those veteran issues.
Thank you.
Super cool. I just want to add also his leadership for looking into this one issue with the VA about the hunt crash. We appreciate all that you're doing, and we look forward to good news from that.
Thanks, Mark.
My name is Curtis Settle. I'm from the Wyoming Apache tribe from Arizona. On the hot vest, my understanding is on the pilot testing right now. It will become permanent. The hot vest.
Will it become permanent?
Yeah.
Tribal hut bash.
Oh, tribal hut bash. No, I'm not sure. I'd like to get back to you on that. I can't give you a solid answer.
All right, thank you.
But let me get your information, Chris.
And would you explain your dilemma to him about how they're not moving from VA per diem into VASH, but off the streets to VASH?
Oh, yeah, well, because our guys in the VA per diem program are at the bottom of the priority list because they're considered housed. And while they're with us, it's our job to get them on housing lists and try to go through every other solution to and leave HUD VASH as a last resort. It used to be when the HUD VASH program first came out, I explained to everybody here, it was a stepping stone. It was a building stepping stone. So the veteran went into rehab, and then they went into shelter, and then they went into a grant per diem program. So they succeeded, because if they couldn't succeed in a shelter, then they weren't going to succeed in a grant per diem program. So anyways, they were given, throughout time, 2+ years to get a good foundation under them to. Then when they got done in the grant per diem program, the HUD VASH voucher was a reward. So you've done all these steps. You've gotten clean and sober. You've got a job. You've got an income. So now your reward is the HUD VASH voucher. And now that's just not happening. They also the guys that come out of the grant per diem program are less likely to need that continued case management. Some of the guys definitely do, but not all of the guys do. They just need the assistance for the rental piece. So I know that all changed when we realized we weren't going to end homelessness in 2012 or whatever the date was there. And then it was like, oh, it's Housing First model came out. And then it's like, okay. So the guy is, we literally, if we kick a guy out of our program, then they can get a HUD VASH voucher. So they're sitting here going, oh, Yeah.
I really get kicked out.
So I'm gonna drink or use and then I'll get kicked out of the program and then I'll be able to be housed, you know,
Has there been any discussions on what agency might be responsible for that? For that requirement that, or for the mislabeling of being housed in a grant program?
we're working on that. It's just,
Is it from
because
HUD?
It'd be HUD or
Right, I
VA or-
assume it's HUD.
Well,
I don't know, is it HUD or VA?
It had to be HUD or VA with that.
Or the
Yeah.
housing, the housing authority is also that third piece, because the housing authority is the one who actually administers it. That's why
yeah.
it's symptomatic to that, who is interpreting all of these variations of her. So the issue that you have is not happening over here in this community
Right.
because somebody else is interpreting it. And
It took 5 years of our going to COC meetings to finally have people understand. Yes, these guys are in a bed and they're housed right now, but it's short term. They're still homeless, getting them counted in the point in time. For a while, they weren't even considered in the point in time because they were housed.
But to your point, I mean, that's the way the system should work. We should be growing capacity in the veterans to move to the next step they need. Not that the system prescribes that they need, but that where they get to the point where they can survive and be successful. And sometimes that's rental and, you know, there's different paths, but this concept of going straight from homelessness and the interpretation that whoever, the administrator going straight to housing, skipping over the people who've been building skills in the grant per diem program and earning an income and maintaining their self crisis free for a period, are then ready to take the next step. And we need to think more in terms of movement versus point in time. And I think some of the people are going homeless person, point in time, fixed problem.
Right.
So can I jump in here with maybe an unpopular view? And
Just want them housed.
I never shy. Well, no, I mean, yes, but I think the research really bears out that once you have housing, you can deal better with a lot of these other issues. So I think that was really the shift, right? So previously we would make people go to emergency shelter and jump through all of these hoops, and then you have to be sober for X number of months or weeks, and then you can go to transitional housing for 2 years where, you know, you work on yourself and you do all these things, and then maybe you're ready for housing. But I think by and large, the research has borne out that the government response has really shifted from being more housing ready focused to housing first, where we're saying, well, you know, you don't really need to do all those things to be able to have a house, right? Because, I mean, housing should be a right for everyone, regardless of where you live, or whether you're houseless or homeless, like you should have a house. And so I think the research, well, the response is largely shift to putting people in housing first and then wrapping the services around them to deal with all of these issues. And I mean, you know, that looks like HUD VASH. It could also look like rapid rehousing, so SSVF and some of these other interventions. And a lot of those things work for people. I mean, in a lot of communities, they do work, and they work well.
But to her point, it's going back to assessing the individual. Because the guy coming off, she may have somebody that's perfectly ready to move into a long-term VASH solution, in housing and living on their own. The guy off the street needs to have the option to go to either one. If that VASH voucher goes to one of her guys, that opens up the opportunity there. And you have what, 26 beds? Is that what you said? So we're not talking huge numbers here, but you know, each person that moves out of that program and frees up another bed in her spot VASH voucher in a more productive long-term way.
Well, I know
But again, wasn't to be clear to make sure I'm tracking. VASH isn't for all of the homeless population.
No.
It's for the most chronic. That was like those with the most severe co-occurring disorders. VASH, when you talk about, well, they're just going through these steps so everyone gets VASH, I'm like, that's not what it was for. So again, if we're tracking on the same level, VASH is very for a small particular sect within the homeless community, and then the community has to find other housing for other folks. But these are the folks that are most chronic, 5, 10, 15 years mental, physical disability. So that, or that veteran with children. So we're talking, if we're tracking, I'm thinking VASH wasn't for everyone.
That's who we're getting into our program right now, are the chronically homeless guys coming into the grant per diem programs.
No, as long as we're tracking, I'm just the way it sounded was, it was for everybody. If you come through these steps, and if you walk through these steps and cross these obstacles, and HUD-VAST is waiting for everyone. That's what I was hearing. So that's not what HUD-VAST was for.
I think that gets back to coordinated entry, right?
A lot of the veterans associations think for everybody. So the word's not getting out, it's for the chronically, you know, because I just did a presentation in New Mexico to the veterans, and they thought VASH was for all of them. And I was going, no, you know, and so it makes a difference. We need to get the education out also so that everybody understands exactly what it's for.
If there's more money for VASH could be for everybody, but I mean, it's a really expensive proposition, right?
Yeah, I'm a vet, I'll take it.
Do we have any numbers for success rate? No, for the
Street to housing, 80% success rate in HUD-VASH. My SSPF program, and we will take someone zero income chronic homeless if they do not qualify for HUD-VASH. We have a 78% success rate with SSPF, and that's with a maximum 9-month rental subsidy. So I hear you. I really do. But the flip side to what you're saying is if you reduced your program to 6 months, you could serve 4 times more veterans. So how many veterans need the full 2 years? How do you do that assessment?
typically, it's a year, right around a year. Not all of the guys take all 2 years.
And I would expect a GPD provider to have a housing ready model. Like, what is your next step? I mean, that's
something you need to talk about from the beginning, right? Is like, okay, you don't have to decide today, but like, what are you doing? And some communities are really ramping up landlord engagement, like community wide, and sharing resources. And maybe that's something that we could think about, like working with some folks in Vermont on for you, because I know you're a small team and it's like daunting, right? If you have 2 full-time staff, I get it.
It's the guys are, I mean, it's like they're so sick of us and hearing you got to fill out those housing applications. I mean, the poor guy just lands on our step, and the next day we're throwing these stacks of housing applications because we got to get them on the lists, and they're just overwhelmed. And so I have cadets from Norwich University that come in and sit with the guys and fill out, because I said once you've got one filled out, you just make a copy of it, and there's all your answers for the other 5 you got to do. But so we're getting that down. We had our VA inspection on Friday, and Jim Bastian, who's the head homeless guy down in White River Junction, he said our housing stuff was by far the best he'd seen. So we have improved because it's just, it takes time to get the relationships with the landlords and the housing authorities and have them understand what we're all about.
So we are going to give Alex an opportunity to make any final comments that you'd like to share with us.
Well, I've got some notes here. I'm definitely going to look more into. I got this.
Okay.
So I'm definitely going to follow up with VA on that. But if anybody has any comments, I think the most effective use of me being here is to hear from you and what problems you're seeing on the ground. Because like I said at the beginning, I can speak from a 30,000 foot level, but outside of my communications with Rita here, I don't get to see a whole lot from the house. We're definitely going to be continuing with oversight. Hopefully somewhere down the line we'll be able to do some field hearings or maybe something along with the administration of the house, or grant per diem, or a combination of the two. If anybody has any comments you'd like me to take back to the congressman, back to the committee, I'd be happy to do that. And I can also serve as coalitions director for the committee. I'd be happy to serve as a point of contact for any of you guys if you'd like to follow up with me.
All right, so we want to thank Alex for joining us today. We certainly appreciate his attendance.
Thank you.
Symposium. And so on behalf behalf of HAC's Executive Director, David Lipset, and of course, our Board of Directors, we want to thank everyone in the room, especially our panelists for joining us, Alex, Congressman Rowe, as well as the folks that are joining us via live stream online today. If you have any comments or if you want to continue the discussion, we actually have a hashtag that we started, hashtag Rural Veterans, and so you want to follow the discussion online, please do so. Anything additional from anyone in the room? All right, with that being said, we also want to extend a big thanks to the Home Depot Foundation as well as the Wells Fargo Housing Foundation for supporting this initiative. Thank you.
A new housing development in Carter County is getting national attention for its take on affordable housing.
Patriot Place, a new complex that offers many first-time homebuyers the chance to buy a home at the same cost as renting an apartment.
Micah Smith found out that of the 41 lots, half are designated specifically for veterans. She spoke to the only resident now living at Patriot Place.
Cream and sugar stuff? How many sugars?
Ronald Hayes almost gave up on his dream of buying his own home.
The interest rates and everything, and it discouraged me.
Hayes said he heard about an organization called Eastern 8, a nonprofit that is trying to help veterans find affordable housing.
They suggested that I come out here, being I was a veteran, because they were developing this area here for veterans.
Hayes' neighborhood, Patriot Place, is an Eastern 8 subdivision that offers veterans and working class people a chance to buy their own home on non-traditional terms.
All the people at Eastern 8, they were great. They worked with me, crunched the numbers and checked my finances and stuff like that.
Eastern 8 Executive Director Retha Patton says for the same price as renting an apartment, residents like Hayes can build their own home and can add a little bit of their own curb appeal.
Lots of funding makes it affordable.
Eastern 8 uses grants and state funds to subsidize the costs associated with the building process. For example, a plot of land that costs $35,000 here.
People can buy lots here for actually more like $20,000 or $25,000.
And now other organizations throughout the country are taking a look at Eastern 8's blueprint, specifically their emphasis on veterans' homes.
I was being invited to Washington, D.C. to speak at Capitol Hill about rural housing for veterans, because that's a huge topic right now.
Patton says for many veterans and other first-time home buyers, owning a home seemed like a pipe dream.
They were able to go from really substandard conditions to this beautiful home, and to them it's their castle.
It's ideal. It's perfect. I find something every day uniquely about it.
For now, Ronald Hayes is the only person living in Patriot Place, but Hayes says he looks forward to seeing his neighbors enjoy the same feeling he got when he opened the doors to his dream. Micah Smith, News Channel 11, in your corner.
The Eastern Aid Executive Director says, as Micah mentioned, people from around the country are watching and trying to figure out how to build something like Patriot Place in their area. Some of those organizations will visit the development next week on April 1st and 2nd. Mark?
How do veterans go from serving our country to out on the streets? Tonight, we head inside a home for homeless vets in Northfield to find out. In part one of our series, The Veterans Place.
I was in the Air Force 1963 through 1967. I was a crew chief on F-4 Phantom fighters.
I was in the Navy, and I was in for almost 10 years, so I was all over the place.
What brought you here?
To this house? Homelessness and just a long series of bad choices.
A guy by the name of Bernie Madoff ruined me, and I became disgusted with society and all that, so I checked out.
The primary reason was I'm a recovering alcoholic. When I got out of rehab, I didn't feel like I was ready yet to face everything on my own yet, and this is a really great support atmosphere here for recovering alcoholics, addicts, that sort of thing.
May 20th, I got off a Greyhound bus in Brattleboro. Didn't know anybody, knew nothing. In a matter of 3 days, I was hooked up with a drop-in center. I had a liaison person from the VA who got me all registered. And the next thing I know, she's telling me about various options, which blew me away. Options? I have options. And one of the options was Northfield.
So it's Karen Boyce, and I am the administrative manager of the Veterans Place.
For folks who aren't familiar with this place, what is the goal of the Veterans Place?
We're a 2-year transitional home for homeless veterans. So when the guys come here, the idea is that they've got a bed to sleep in, they got a roof over their head, they've got access to food 24/7. We have transportation to appointments at the VA or to job interviews or whatever.
What's a day like in here?
It's home. And like any home, you know, we get up, and some of us are up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning to go work. Some others of us, not so much, but we have breakfast together. We'll talk about the books that we're reading. We'll talk about the VA.
They're not the stereotyped, you know, veteran with the shopping cart that the media has made the guys out to be. We've had retired lieutenant colonels. We've had, you know, the young kids from the Iraq and Afghanistan war. Lots of Vietnam veterans.
We're a unique fellowship in that we're all veterans. Anybody that's watching this that has served in the military will understand what I'm talking about.
There are far too many of us out there in the street, in the woods. There can't be enough Northfield. And I know that because my lifestyle has been out there on the street and in the woods. And I'm aware of far too many men and women who need an opportunity like this, who are falling between the cracks. They're getting lost.
With veterans, it's very easy, you know, once they get home, but once that uniform comes off and the issues start to to build up, and that guys have, you know, a problem getting back into civilian life, and then lots of times, you know, families just don't know what to do anymore. So it, you know, the younger vets, anyways, that's when they, you know, they leave and they don't have any place to go.
I think the first thing I would want to tell them is that this is a house of humanity. It's a house of people who have a record of service and who, one of the cliches I would use, but I would say to the other person out on the street, there, but for the grace of God, go you.
Monday on the 30, we took you inside the Veterans Place in Northfield to show you how some of the men living there ended up homeless. Tonight, in part 2 of that special report, what they're doing to turn their lives around.
Well, we're really not that different from anybody else.
If we fail, so be it. But don't make our failure that much easier by prejudging or by rejecting us.
How has your life changed since moving in?
Oh, I think my whole attitude about life has changed.
We've served over 230 veterans in the 7 years we've been open. We have a 78% success rate with transitioning our guys out into long-term housing.
I'm told about a quarter of the folks who come here end up coming back. How do you avoid being in that pool?
I think I'm just working the plan. And you'll hear that from a lot of the guys, if you speak with a few of them, is working our plan. We each have an individual plan.
For my part, I know in my heart that I will never return to anything other than sobriety. I have grandchildren, I have children, I have friends. How the love and the happiness that I see on their faces when they see that I am sober and straight and back in their lives and in a positive way, that's enough reinforcement for me. I suspect in many cases with folks who have come back that they probably lack that kind of support out there. I would suspect that would be a real key element in a failure to make a really true transition into sobriety.
I think, for myself, that that's not going to be a problem, but then neither does anybody else who does come back.
Being here, they've given me an opportunity to get into the workforce, which I'm doing. I'm joining the Civil Air Patrol. Civil Air Patrol is going to provide me with means to obtain a pilot's license. I want to be an air ambulance pilot.
I've recently started a course of study to become a medical billing and coding technician, which is moving along quite nicely. And I just feel like there's hope for the future again, which I hadn't for a long time.
My life has done a 180. It's been an amazing and wonderful experience.
Are you ever afraid of failure?
Oh, I'm always afraid of failure. I think everybody is. But it's how you deal with that fear of failure that really kind of decides how you go from there. And I'm in the past have not dealt with that fear of failure all that well, which is part of the reason why I'm here now.
It's hard not to feel some sense of guilt. I'm being given an opportunity, and I truly appreciate it. And in some ways, I feel like I've fallen into it. It's not like I went out looking for it. And I know there must be people like myself who are out looking for it and not finding it.
A lot of my answer to things not going exactly the way I wanted them to was, I'll just have another drink. Then it doesn't matter so much. Now it's, that's not an option. And I'm actually dealing with things that I probably should have dealt with years ago. And doing it in a fashion that's healthy for a change.
I'm going to leave Northfield, but I'm going to take with me not only the improvement in myself, but I'm going to take with me relationships that I've developed with my fellow housemates that are going to last a long time, if not forever.
Our thanks to Jim and Mike for sharing their stories with us. We, of course, wishing them all the best.